Um, Ready, aim, release! Hello, we're back. It's another Monday. Carlo's here with me. You can see
I
there with
am.
his mildly sunburnt head.
Yeah. I mean, I'm English. I went outside for the weekend. Therefore, I'm burnt.
That checks out.
Yep.
Meme
Mark.
checks out. It's a Monday, and as we all know, on Mondays nothing ever happens before 7 p.m. GMT +1 at the moment. But tell you what does happen is that things happen on Tuesdays,
Mm-hmm.
or usually just about like after 7 or 8. Yeah, usually like 9 or 10 o'clock on a Monday. So last week we saw the Golden Company get released. Not released, sorry. They get spoiled, leaked, revealed, shown, unhidden. Any other words that we could use?
Seen. They were seen.
Seen.
They were seen all around the world. They were posted on all the discords.
Yeah.
Like, what more do you want?
They definitely felt seen last week. Golden Company got whatever it is you want to say about them shown around. So our duty to you guys as our rightful watchers here, and our duty to the community is, of course, to give really bad hot takes on said pieces. Should we dive in?
Yeah, let's go.
So, first of all, we'll drive straight. I cannot talk apparently. We'll drive straight in with the meme that is the Golden Company War Elephants. They are finally here. Look at the lovely imagery box art there on show. And then the high quality image of the card as well. So,
Questionable.
questionable. These guys were rumored to be at 7. The back of the card has been seen, and indeed they are 7. 7 points for a 6 move. 3 dice. Oh, sorry, 4 dice on 3s. Running around. 3 armor, 6 morale. Monster. It has, similarly to the Free Folk Mammoth, the defense profile being 8 wounds, can't control objectives, maximum 2 wounds from a failed panic. However, it also has this rule which each time this would perform an action, not activation by the way, action, it takes a morale test, and on a fail it does nothing. This morale test is circumnavigated if there's a Golden Company infantry unit within long range. More on that in a second. And its attack profile, innate. It has vicious. The defender does not roll defense dice, sorry, and it gains +1 attack dice for each of the defender's rank on the charge.
Mm-hmm.
The more on that infantry unit moment. They are 7 points, and unfortunately, they have a list building requirement, which is you only get to take 1 Golden Company War Elephant for every Golden Company infantry unit you have in the list. So you quite literally cannot put a Golden Company War Elephant in the list until you've taken, as it stands, Crossbowmen, or as we will see later on, Swordsmen. I will briefly say that the Swordsman cost, just for context of talking about this, is 7 points. So the minimum cost of obtaining a War Elephant in your list is now 14 for 2 activations. I feel that is relevant to talk about these guys. Carlo, any thoughts?
Well, Ian's right, which is they were seen and then quickly forgotten. You know, like it's not. It's odd because obviously they're so not a normal unit. They have similarities to the mammoth, but like they're so not an interesting unit. Like in terms of the way it might change the game. They are okay at very best, and then they have all these limitations around them. The unit's going to become a right liability if you haven't got that Golden Company unit near them, which means that you're like tied not only in your list building but also in your deployment to where these things are going to go. I think it's fine as a design space. It's better that everybody's not talking about them as being like, oh my god, this is game defining, because it's a neutral unit, and because it's a monster as well. You know, we know that we've had issues in the past with monster types being overperformers and completely dominating the way the game can be played. So I'm not sad over the fact that this is not going to make any impact on competitive play in my mind.
Yeah, the 14 point kind of like access. I mean, you have to spend 14 points to get access to this. And as we'll look at the swordsman in a minute, they aren't. That's not terrible. 14 for 2 activations, but at the game as it currently stands, that is neutral. That's neutral playing for the game, right? At 7 points an activation, that means you're going to average over a 40-point list 5 to 6 activations. So this is going to have to be one of your bigger things in the list. And it's not. I mean, again, we shouldn't do it, but we can do it, and we definitely should do it. Is you look at flayed men in relation to this, and flayed men just do this jobs better.
Yeah, I mean, flayed men, you have to give some value to no defensive dice.
Yep.
Being used, but don't forget that's no defensive dice, not auto wounds. So blocks still block that. Means that hardened will affect after the initial charge. Hardened will just entirely negate like any damage that this unit can do effectively. They're not good at all at seemingly in protracted combat. They don't even have any kind of like fail their panic stompy mechanic in that way that you might have expected. Like getting them in and getting them engaged is just the start of your opponent's problems, and they're going to want to run away from them and stuff like that. No, actually, they're actually just quite a straightforward unit. They're effectively like Lance Cavalry, but with a very different build, which is once engaged, the unit is not achieving a lot. So yeah, like I don't see where they're ever gonna be worth 7 points. Never mind the 14. If we considered them very, very good, but the unit that you had to bring was average or subpar, then we can talk about whether or not the whole pairing is a good trade-off. But outside of thematic lists, outside of you just thinking that elephants are cool, even if you have a Golden Company unit, the elephant itself is probably not worth your next 7 points.
Yeah.
There is a maybe question, and this is I guess puts how bad this unit is in my mind into perspective. There is maybe a list build out there that neutrals want to use that use it. Maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking actually exactly this. We already see the kind of combo of cards get played a lot, and it's ultimately just good cards. But I can see planning and insight being used with the Golden Company War Elephant, so you can be like, right, my elephant's charging this infantry block. I've got 4 dice from the charge, +3 for you being on full health, plus an extra 2 from planning and insight, controlling letters. Bang! Here's 9 dice with no saves on 3s. If potentially getting rerolls, oof, that's going to be like 8 wounds. And then you go, but it's not a guaranteed 12 each time. And you really are hoping to put that dent in. If neutrals can double down and make that a 12 wound reliable charge, there is something to say that that's not terrible. But that only works against infantry for a start, so cavalry, no hope. And let's not even go into solos. This is just absolute sadness against solos, because it can't do that much damage. Certainly against the likes of giants and things. Again, things like go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say, interesting. Logan Breeze saying, like, have you seen the model? He doesn't even like the model. I have. There are some more recent pictures, and from somebody who I believe has them in person. Their description is that the models look pretty good in person. But there is, like, I do think that they're quite interesting. I think that the very original scene photos of this unit like had a really weird perspective, basically where really bad pictures did not show the unit in a good light, which comes back to this idea, like, why is it the community that's spoiling new units? You know what I mean? Like, Demon could do so much better. Like, it's made a lot of people think that this unit looks shit because the first thing that anybody saw was somebody taking images with a really crap camera, really odd perspective. It almost looked like the War Machine base taken from the side. It almost looked square, like, and it looked really flat, really no detail. But yeah, like, I do, from somebody who I think has them in person, they say that they actually look pretty nice in person, and like, hopefully I think they're about the right size. Like, I think they'll look impressive enough on the battlefield, and they could be a nice focal point if you're willing to throw 14 points down the drain.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I was one of the few people who, looked at the images, or one of the many people who looked at those images initially and thought, God, they look fucking awful. I was not impressed. But I have really weird standards because I don't actually think the Mammoth models are that good, and I know a lot of people like it. So, maybe I'm just not into the aesthetic of the way they've gone with these. But these aren't too bad. You know what? These aren't too bad. I don't know if
they look nice. I think they look good in those pictures.
Yeah, they look fine.
Two different kind of poses. One's almost charging. One's a bit more casual. I'm waiting to get hold of them. Like, I'm not going to tell you that I'm desperately waiting to paint them, but I like to take the miniatures out of the box and go, oh, they're quite nice, and then put them back in the box.
And then pretend that there's something else together, and then put them away in a cupboard forever and forget about them. They're good. They're fine. And that's all that it's all that we hope, is that they're good and that people want to collect them, and that they provide the service that they want to provide. They are by no means complete garbage tier models, which actually look depressing. But as Scorched Earth said in chat, it's no Cold Hands Elk. That is true.
But that's the best miniature they ever released.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, very much like there's something there to be said about the elephants there. Overall, I'm not taken by them.
No.
I'll be honest with you. For 7 points, if you removed this morale check mechanic, I still don't know if I'd take them. Like, I feel like there's this negative impacted thing on a 7-point unit, which I almost don't care about when it comes to evaluating the unit, but I know for a fact when it comes to playing them that will just hurt that little bit when it comes to playing the game. Right.
Yeah, I mean, the double champions of the Stag barrelists might certainly be panicking, but like that's about it.
Oh god, anything that makes anyone, you know what? We talked about skew lists and everything like that. Anything that makes people stop running these ridiculous skews. I'm not a big fan of them anyway. I think the Raider spam skew is not good with insignificant. I think the everything has armor 2 skew actually isn't that good. But I know that it wins games. I know that people win games a lot with these things. Anything that makes those suffer is always a good thing in my book. So Maybe I love the war elephant. Maybe it's the best thing that's come to the game since sliced bread. So.
And yeah, like here's quite a damning assessment actually. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm on board with Pavel, which is like it wouldn't be wild for them to have a cavalry maneuver. Like
Probably not.
really, like you know, what I mean, in what ways do they differ from lance cavalry? Like really, do you know what I mean? They bring less wounds, but they have this negative impact. They're not very good in sustained combat. They have a 3+6+, which is the same defense profile that you get on these lance cavalry. You know that's the same thing as you get on Tully Cav. Same thing you get Knights and Castle. Same thing you get on Flayed Men, right? They're 6 movement, yes. The others are 5, but like them being 5 or maybe even 4 movement with a cavalry maneuver would bring them into the realms of viability, right? It would be a more extreme, heavy hitting on the charge, no armor save, best against armored stuff cavalry unit at that point. But instead, they're like a very cumbersome infantry unit that has to stay within range of other things. They're a bit weird, yeah. Stephen, I'd give it. It shouldn't be talking power wise, just pure power wise, because of all the things that roll into it and the current units that are required to select it. I'd say it's like 2 out of 10.
I was going for 2 as well. Yeah. The thing that they did the thing that they've done with mammoths, and they've clearly done it here with the war elephant as well, is that they function on their own. They don't need support per se, but they are just battering rams. Like this is something you deploy in the middle of your force. You almost point at the center objective and go, "I'm going that way." Whatever stands in the way is what I'm going to charge and kill. They are not a finesse piece. That's the thing. They are just this thing is coming at you. Move out of the fucking way or die. And they do have that effect. The problem is that that's not conducive to winning games. It's
interestingly there is something I hadn't given them any value to, and yes, the game is much more fighty based and much less objective based. But I mean, it is an 8 wound
contest
monster.
Yes, yeah.
Not everything that I'm trying to remember whether the game modes actually specify solos.
Yes, they do. Solos.
So you can't even contest.
No, you can contest. You can contest. It says solos count ranks for contesting.
Yeah, but he's not a solo. He's a monster.
So
on War Machine base.
War Machine or monster War Machine or solos count as solos. So War Machine base or so chariots, Harakars, these guys, wolves, they're all solos.
That's what my initial thought was, and then I just got myself into a rules discussion about whether or not a War Machine fitted the requirements of the mission specific contest rules. But anyway, you've got a unit which you're not scared to have in combat. It's the ideal place for it to be, roughly speaking. Obviously, not grinding combat on the charge, and it has 8 wounds. There's in certain game modes, there's nothing in the game it can't contest, right? And so that's useful, except for the fact that it doesn't have any real defensive capabilities. So it's cavalry, it's lance cavalry, it's heavy cavalry with 2/3 of the normal wounds. It doesn't have any decay by going to a 2nd rank, but like it's only a couple of wounds more than being 1 rank anyway. It has nothing around like giant mechanics of like taking half as many hits. It has nothing which says when it's hit, it's going to strike back. When it fails a panic test, it's going to go crazy. Anything like this. So you have no reason to not want to attack this thing, and it's not that defensive. And then you bring its wounds down, and then it's not contesting. All I'm saying is like it could be an amazing contest machine if it had some fear factor around it being attacked. But right now, like once it charges you, you might as well just fight it and kill it.
Daniel says, can things contest if they're all saying they can't control? Yes, contesting and controlling objectives are different. Controlling objectives is specifically the owning and the scoring of objectives. Contesting is got nothing to do with controlling. It can just prevent somebody from controlling. So yeah, ironically, people perhaps didn't know this, but it's one of the strengths of freedmen and targs for 3 points is being a solo unit on a solo base. They technically have 6 wounds, which means they technically have 6 ranks. So they can contest objectives all day. The major difference is that targs don't run freedmen because I don't know. I think the consensus
Well,
is
I mean, it
basically
loses five of those ranks to one attack, basically. So
exactly yeah.
like,
It's a bit pointless.
not used.
Yeah, these guys just sadness really.
Well, like I ain't using it, but like
But yeah,
yeah,
he's
like
you know what he does? He does bring a different. It's something different.
I'm much glad. I'd much like I said. I'm much prefer. I'm not sad because I don't want them to dominate the game.
Yeah.
Right. That's maybe just me, but like I'd rather this thing came out and everybody forgot about it. To be honest, practically forget that it's even a monster. Forget that it's like weird rules, kind of like very polarizing in the past. Right. Just that it's a neutral unit. I don't want any neutral unit to come out and it to just be the entire talking point of forever for the rest of the edition, because that's really boring and the game becomes a large amount about like who has the best deck to manipulate the amazing neutral unit which I can implement.
Yeah.
And
100%.
and yeah, I'm not sad at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, me neither. But it is for me that the morale test thing is just think is an unnecessary addition. That's the only bit that I'm sad about. I just think it's just unnecessary. It's not required. And yeah, I just rather see that mechanic go because that's kind of like what they added to Mammoths originally with the mechanic of trampling and stuff like this, and this idea that you don't control objectives or things you want to do. And I don't like anything in the game which is some form of test which takes away an onus or a choice. Yeah, taking away choice is never a positive impact. If anyone has to do this morale test on a mammoth because a war elephant, because the supporting Golden Company infantry unit died, for example, you just feel bad. You just feel shit, and it's like, oh well, my elephant didn't do anything. Oh, that sucks. And that's just not fun. Like it's a counter fun thing, right? Which I don't like. But yeah. Apart from that, yeah, they're serviceable, and for 7 points, yeah, it's right that they're more like a 6.5 point unit wrapped up in 7 points with a gatekeeping requirement. And as people in chat have been alluding to, if there is a Golden Company commander coming out that offers Golden Company affiliation to an infantry unit, that wouldn't necessarily be too goddamn awful to allow one war elephant. That wouldn't be terrible.
No, yeah, sure. Like,
yeah.
Like I say, like in isolation, I don't think this unit is necessarily worth spending 7 points on. So if you're gonna go out there and spend your commander choice on unlocking it, then I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like it's not been set up in a way that the infantry unit is maybe a bit of a burden. It's not quite worth its points cost, but that the elephant's amazing once you've unlocked it. No, the elephant's thoroughly just all right at very best at 7. Never mind the fact that it's kept behind this requirement.
Yeah. Cool. So that's the Golden Company War Elephant, and people might think, oh, it's a bit strange to start with the War Elephant, but going on to the Swordsman. But I do think the War Elephant of all these things is actually a lot easier to analyze than the Swordsman, which we'll come on to in a second, and of course the Golden Company Commander, who I think is officer, which we'll come on to in a second. So the Golden Company Swordsman then. Let's just have a look at this art on the box for a moment. I quite like that art. I know it's quite simple, but I quite like it.
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, purple, orange, gold.
Yeah.
We'll see how they paint up. I am interested to see somebody do them in a really powerful gold scheme, and whether or not it comes out well on the models. Because the models, as we discussed in the past, the models are a little bit hodgepodge in their in their outlook, and whether or not a good paint scheme can like tie them together again, I'd be quite interested in.
The someone who's been painting kind of like purpley, kind of violety colours more recently.
Painting, that's a lie.
I know, right? Not much, but I really do think there's a lot you can do with kind of like these deep royal purples to bring out a lovely colour, which I do think is very good for like modelers. I was remarkably surprised when I was looking at some of the stuff for things like Chris Baker, right, and some of the stuff that he's done we've shown on the channel before. But some of the specifically purple is such an interesting color to see people paint and get some lovely results with. I am on the side with you. Gold armor can look tacky,
Shite.
to put it bluntly. Yeah, shite. But it can also look really well done. So
yeah, a hard tone to get.
Yeah.
And orange is normally a nightmare to paint as well.
Yeah.
So, not an easy scheme that they've set up there.
No, not at all. Which will be even more amazing when we see some of the absolutely incredible painters that we've seen on the channel or in the community. Seeing them paint these up, I can imagine we're going to be like, oh god, that's so good. I'll just go and beat the meat to some images. Anyway, right. So the models themselves. It is the infamous. Let's start with the one on the far right. Oh look, it's that one that we saw that picture that one time on that reveal stream. So I believe that is now literally everything from
CMON Expo.
Yeah, from the CMON Expo, I think it was the reveal
10
picture.
Months ago?
Yes,
maybe even like 12 months ago.
Something similar. That is now everything from that picture now out. So if we consider that that was CMON's announcement of all of those things, then we must be due something soon for them to announce some stuff, right? Right?
Well, I tell you what. I'll tell you one thing about this, right? It does make me actually believe that Martells might be soon.
What?
Because the last time that they spoke about them and Martells, like they spoke about them in a way that they were very similar, right? Like timescale wise, I believe. And I know that these haven't been officially released, but obviously I'm just talking about like the time in which somebody will non-officially get hold of Martells, which will be actually an exciting release, no matter how good they are, right? Like that's the issue. Like you release a unit, people only really care if it's good or bad, right? You release a faction, people will go apeshit over Martells, whether they're top tier or bottom tier.
Well, characters, right? In general, characters. Yeah. I mean, we saw it a little bit with the hero boxes as of late. Hero boxes in general will generate some level of hype because characters are interesting in the game. We've talked about it so many times before, how really Game of Thrones is centered on the characters. So the opportunity for people to go, oh, what does that character have? Is always really interesting. And yeah, new factions, you've got that, you've got new units with new mechanics potentially, you've got new design spaces that get explored much more often. Yeah, new factions are way more exciting than literally anything else.
These 4 models, the one on the right is the only one that I like.
The one on the right? So this one here? Yeah. Is that because his sword's in the right hand?
Wow, I mean that is somewhat incidental, but yes, all the others are left-handed swordsmen for whatever given reason. I don't know, like the third one the one just to the left of him, the third from the left, he just looks like a miniature from like 20-30 years ago. Like, you know, like he just looks like one of those sculpts which was good back in the early noughties, back in the 90s. This guy on the far left, he has a weird head and a weird pose.
He looks a little bit like he looks a little bit like an alien child who's like, and he's like leaning forward slightly, and he's like, "Ooh, where am I?"
Yeah, he looks lost. And the second one in from the left, he's okay, maybe good from a different perspective. Just don't like the way he's hunched, really, but.
He brings me like he very much, in fact, gives me not Rose Knight vibes, right?
Yeah.
You could. I feel like the 2 best models here also happen to be the two models that look closest to Rose Knights.
That's true.
And the other, yeah, the guy with the square head helmet, which I know is not square, but bloody hell, it looks square. It's fine, but you are right. It just feels dated now. It's but it's not bad.
The one on the
It's
far
just
right really does like genuinely just look like he's from the Rose Knights.
yeah. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, so those are the models. They look great. He says after like potentially just saying they don't look great. So there they are in the box. You actually have annoyingly two of them are the guys with the swords in the right hand side.
Yeah,
the best
it's
sculpt.
my favorite sculpt.
There's only two of them. You do have the commander there, and you also have the bannerman. The bannerman.
Looks good. From the bit that I've seen and that stuff like that. Yeah.
That's actually one thing in general. Greyjoy's pending because there's one or two Greyjoy bannermen who I just think look sad. But the bannermen in general that we see across the board in A Song of Ice and Fire, I think are actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're nice models. And that is one thing that they do have going for them a lot. All right then. So
Ilya is exactly right. The guy second from the left looks just like he's wearing, I believe they call it Imperial armor in World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
I.e. the guards that you see standing around all of Stormwind and all of all of the human areas. He would just be blue with a white feather and just 100%. That's a guy from World of Warcraft.
Mm-hmm. Someone in chat will have to remind me where the Stormwind Bank is. So we'll get there. God, that's an old meme. An old meme, but it checks out. All right then. So the Golden Company Swordsman. This absolutely fantastic high quality image brought to you by the people of the internet. So it is a 5-move infantry unit at 7 points with a 754 on 3+ profile, 4 armor, 6 morale. It has the attack tactical strike, which is base sundering, and if you control letters, you roll highest attack die value. And it also comes baked into the unit, Iron Resolve. For 7 points, I really don't think these guys are bad. They're not brilliant, but they're not bad.
They're not like they're good enough that they can't be 6. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Right? They can't be 6. So just if you think that combination of abilities is worth 7 points, then sure, great. Personally, I just think that their tactical strike is meh. Like I don't see any value in that. If you control letters, roll the highest attack die. I think that's effectively been overcosted. Like I think that if that was something else, then you might get away with saying that these are actually like a really acceptable, decent 7-point unit. But as I've discussed recently, I've got a lot of respect for Iron Resolve and its usefulness. I think that is a good ability. 4+, 6+, which is, you could just describe it as a 4+, 5+ because of Iron Resolve if you wanted.
Yep.
And the 754 on a 3+ is a perfectly fine elite-ish attack profile. The sundering is good. The only thing is if you could swap that letters for something a bit more useful in my perspective, then I would be like, yeah, okay, these are a decent 7-point unit. Problem for me is that I don't really see them any combo potential. Really, there's not. They're a very good standalone unit. They're fine to just put on the battlefield for 7 points and do their thing by themselves. I think that they can beat units that are cheaper than them, and they probably lose to a lot of things in the 7-point bracket, at least the 7-point bracket that is utilized, like actually 7-point units that do see the field.
Mm-hmm.
But more specifically, those 7-point units nearly always have ways to really empower themselves, be it through an attachment, be it through like their specific combination with their deck, be it all these things. So I think they're fine.
Yeah.
And not any better.
I drew immediately when I saw these. I drew a comparison internally with Night's Watch Swarm Brothers, who the Swarm Brothers aren't lighting the field on fire, but they are kind of. When you look at a 7-point unit, you look at Swarm Brothers and go, yeah, those are on the kind of like decent end of 7-point units. While also, if you told me that they need to go to 8 because they're too powerful, I would tell you flat out no. They would be terrible at 8. They would be too strong at 6. They are kind of like a staple, good 7-point unit that sees play. And if it wasn't for the fact that Hunters exist so much in Night's Watch, Swarm Brothers would probably be the staple 7-point unit.
Absolutely.
And they are, and that's not to say that they're bad. You know, they take the middle and they go, we're just above it, we're good. I look at these guys and I compare them to the Swarm Brothers, and they have exactly the same attack profile, movement, defensive profile. When you count for Iron Resolve, the 5 morale of the Swarm Brothers effectively is the same, but they have the -1 wound taken, which isn't nothing as a defensive thing. They've got Sundering the same way that Swarm Brothers have. And then instead of martial training for the rerolls and vulnerable token, they have this letters, highest attack dice thing. That's the weakness. That right there is where they fall down.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So I agree with Stephen. Like I'd even be happy with it if it just was swords.
Yeah.
If it was swords, then it means that like if the unit's not got very many models left, it's down to 4 models, something like that. I'm still dangerous to open the round with the swords. But as soon as you make it that I can't activate the ability and make the attack in one fell swoop, outside of Baelish, you know, like Baelish, he's got too many important uses for you to start saying, oh, but I'll just combo that with Baelish. It's like, yes, okay. But like Baelish has
infinitely many other.
Yeah, exactly. So if I could be certain that I can just open the round, or at any given time that swords is open, I can take that without requiring me to also have another zone, then I think that would be better. I don't think it'd make it like amazing, but still, you know, I think that is better.
A lot of people in chat saying if it came with rerolls as well, that would probably be enough. Yeah, you know what? If it came with rerolls, I would almost put it comparable with your Sworn Brothers. Like it's very comparable at that point.
Yeah, rerolls is effectively martial training at that point. Very, very similar. Makes them much more, much better in a continuous grinding combat without charges required.
I tell you what,
they're okay.
I tell you what I did actually think about, and this is like super mean level. This is not good, I don't think, for competitive play. But I did think, obviously, Targs being a kind of supposedly ally with them, I did finally see a place for Zarazo and Daxos coming down onto letters, influencing these guys, and it's like, sure, it's not a strong opening play, but I've got some cards now. Maybe put a token out. But specifically, if you charge me, I'm really unlikely to die from full health because of Iron Resolve, and I will attack you back with Sundering and 8 dice because of Zarazo and Daxos. That's not trash. It's not great. It really isn't what the likes of Targs are looking for. But I do think there's something there, maybe. But I do think it's probably more mean than it is actually competitive. It's not.
I'm sorry. Come on. In Targs for 7 points, you could have Unsullied Swordsman, you could have Unsullied Pikemen, right?
Yeah.
Why are you fucking around with these much more mediocre Golden Company Swordsmen?
Completely agree.
And they are mediocre. They're not a total write-off. If your faction really doesn't have anything worthwhile in the bracket and you want to fill it out, then yeah, you can go for it. Maybe they will start to see some play in and around, like similar to whether like a Bolton Blackguard, like sort of like see play here and there. I almost forget that they exist, and then suddenly like someone fields and I'm like, oh, you know what? They are an absolutely fine 6-point unit. That's where I put the Golden Company Swordsmen right now, which is you can't write them off. They're a 7-point unit, but 7 points is just a lot of powerful units exist in that category, and they're not a game-defining and powerful unit. They're only okay.
The only thing I see where these guys come in for me potentially, like the only way I see these guys lighting anything on like fire and performing is if there's some form of cheap or free attachment in the commander that gives them something a bit, and then ultimately what I'm looking for is assault orders. I can see very much these guys with assault orders being very dangerous, because you can just be like, right, well, I'll take letters assault order, that'll cancel any token play, it will cancel any card draw for this round for you, and it might leave open a swords or bags play for your opponent, and they might, oh, well, attack you back, and it's like, I don't care. I'm gonna hit you again. I'm gonna hit you hard. So your best thing to do is heal, probably, or retreat, probably. But you know what? I've still got swords, so I can do something else. I do see that potentially as a strong play, but realistically, then you're talking Drogo, who has better things in Targ, Space Starks, who for 7 points, I don't think they'll be looking for these guys anytime soon. Which means that realistically, and then what? There's like Greyjoys. No, you're taking Iron Makers usually, or something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do think it's actually just interesting that they even came out with 5 movement and 4 armor instead of 4 movement and 3 armor.
Yep.
They're practically the first shielded models in the game to not come with 4 movement and 3 armor, right? Like, yes. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, for basically all that they look like Rose Knights, they aren't. And there is, people said it in chat, there is credence to say that they wouldn't be terrible in Baratheons.
As like a different vibe to Wardens or Rose Knights, right? Like, I think off the top of my head, possibly Stormcrow Mercs was more like their buckler thing.
Yeah.
Which isn't really a shield. They're definitely not armored.
But they're leather armor, not plate, right?
Possibly like. Oh no! Now I'm starting to think of more. There's also pikemen, right? Pikemen are 5 movement and 4 armor. So there is previous form, but the way that they look, it's because they're left-handed. Yeah.
Makes them faster.
Lefties run faster, but don't know how to use the shield. Clearly. Yeah, they just looked like a 4 movement 3 armor unit. So it's quite surprising to me that they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, just looking at what chat's saying. Rerolls again, still things. Stephen says they seem disjointed. They do just a little bit. Not far off, but just a little bit. Dan saying like the Little Bear and Starks potentially working with these guys. Yeah, might do.
Yeah, but Little Bear and Starks is Dan's answer to everything.
I mean,
right now at least.
Lyanna, the Little Bear, is freaking great. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely a Dan special. And Doug pointing out that shields are weaker in the wrong hand. That'll be what it is. Shield in the right hand doesn't work properly.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you know what's actually more aggravating of all this, by the way? You notice the art images they use for the card is the best looking model. And he's the least representative of the unit. Oh dear. Literally the least models. Oh, Jesus. Anyway. Shall we move on to the officer? Because I think we've had enough of these guys. I actually do think we'll see these. I think we'll see these on the board. I think we'll see these on the board because people want to play War Mammoths. Sorry, War Elephants. I think we'll see these on the board without Elephants because I think people are going to be willing to try them to see what they kind of come out to be. The Commander. The Golden Company Officer. Boisterous Charisma and Dauntless. So, Dauntless is very easy to analyse. Pass a wound, pass a test, heal a wound. We've seen that countless times on loads of different things, and it is generally speaking, most people will say Dauntless is actually pretty good for 1 point. If it comes with anything else for 1 point, Dauntless is pretty damn good. It's
Yeah.
It's one of those half-point abilities we've seen elsewhere. It costs
Yeah.
half a point, but it's almost good enough to be a point on its own. Almost.
Yeah.
But it's not.
I'm not buying it for a point myself.
No. It's neat.
But
There's better things, unfortunately. But yeah.
yeah.
Boisterous Charisma, though. So this is what we see on Renly, Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. This unit may never be targeted by enemy orders, tactics cards, or be influenced by enemy NCUs. We also see the more recent addition of Dolorous Ed has this. Once his unit loses one rank, it basically is this. After his unit loses a rank.
I'd forgotten because that little impact of an ability, generally speaking.
It's one of those which I actually think Boisterous Charisma is a very good ability. I don't think people realize how useful it can be. The problem is never how good it is, but what you're losing to gain from it. And the Golden Company Officer comes in at 2 points.
2 points.
That's a hard sell.
Price tag.
If this was 1 point, I'm no word of a lie. I think you'd see it all the time.
And here's how good it would be at 1 point, and actually is an interesting concept around Boisterous Charisma. If it was 1 point, I would look to build a horrible skew list where it was in every single one of my units.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And
100%.
then it also increases its own value because at that point, I'm entirely immune to orders, tactics, cards, and influence NCUs. Right? I might even be so interested in the concept that I might run Paramount plus all my other units having them, just to absolutely ensure that not a single unit can be targeted by them.
And that shut down a lot of shit, by the way. That shuts down some of the most dangerous shit in the game.
But that also shows you why it's not the be all to end all, because obviously, assuming your opponent understands how these things work, you can then just target something else most of the time, right? Like, yes, you can use it to be entirely, I have no fear of Lannister supremacy. I have no fear of XYZ card, or do you know what I mean? And that can be useful. That can be important. But your opponent can pretty much just work around those things.
Yeah.
They're generally speaking not the best abilities anyway. If they are if you already have the requirement that your opponent allows you to trigger it. If your opponent allows you to trigger it by engaging you with a particular unit, then generally speaking, at the top of competitive play, not that important anyway. All the things that you would really want to deny, a lot of them don't target in the way you want them to.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of things that you can still be kind of affected by. But yeah, I would, now that I've talked myself into it, and people are talking about the Stormcrow Merc's route to get it out at 6 points a unit because of the adaptive ability. The unit's okay in its 4 point capacity, shall we call it, with its adaptive point. It'd be interesting to understand as a list building concept that if you had just that plus, I really do think that you have to effectively have a commander who has it as well. Otherwise, now your commander unit is just going to be the target of everything in the entire game.
Yeah, it just gets blown up.
So effectively, it feels like you need to play it with Renly Lord Paramount, which is also another handicap that I think is going to hold it back. I would be interested as a concept as to what it would deny and what lists opponents would just be like, well, I can't play this list because I can't use my major abilities target and I don't get them at all.
Mm-hmm.
Mel is what comes to people's minds, but actually, I think that interestingly, if you played a single Mel list, then really, I actually wouldn't be scared to play my Mel list at all. I'd just say, okay, I play Mel, I'll gain the Vicious, and the second part is entirely optional. And I'm just like, well, I don't take any wounds, and I don't do any wounds to you. Unless you're talking about the Roos, Mel, Jacken, everything all in on this test Mel list, then I'm like, I don't care. I don't need to target you.
It's worth remembering, though, that Mel, the specific wording on Boisterous Charisma is or be influenced by enemy NCUs. Mel influences a friendly unit, then targets an enemy unit, so Mel navigates through Boisterous Charisma. So
there you go.
It doesn't even protect you. No. But it does work against a lot more of the, let's go to Free Folk being, one of the stronger armies on the board. Coordination Tactics, so Warcry doesn't work. Can't target anything. Can't target the Warcry because that's an order. So Warcry, you can't be Warcried. You cannot be trapped by trappers. Again, a very popular pickup from the meta right now. You can't have there's too many when an enemy is performing a panic test. Ironically, Subjugation of Power doesn't prevent there's too many because it doesn't target the unit making the attack. It targets the defending unit making the panic test. So there's a big one. You can't be targeted by Surrounded and Exposed. Some token gen. I mean, it means all the token gen's gone. Sure, it's not a big deal though. But it does shut down some of the strongest things in Free Folk. Let's look at Night's Watch. Oh wait, it doesn't shut down a single thing in Night's Watch because they're all friendly targets things. So it does nothing to protect against Night's Watch whatsoever. It's also worth remembering that Night's Watch orders target their own unit in Relentless and Quickfire. So again, it does.
And martial training, right?
Martial training, yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah. So it doesn't do anything in the Night's Watch matchup at all. Outside of maybe it stops Take the Black because when the unit dies it has Boisterous Charisma, so you can't take the black. Or maybe it doesn't stop Take the Black because the unit's dead and so it doesn't have Boisterous Charisma anymore, and then I don't fucking know.
I'd tell you to go fuck yourself if I played Take the Black and you said, oh no, I have Boisterous Charisma. I'd say, no, you fucking don't. You're dead.
But that sounds like a really bad way of giving your Night's Watch opponent Boisterous Charisma, which you really don't want to give Night's Watch, and Dauntless, which they can pay a point for if they want. Yeah, those are the two big ones. Lannister, it will prevent quite a lot of Lannister stuff actually. Probably doesn't affect anything in Stark or Targ even potentially. And Greyjoys, there might be some stuff, but we're talking now going down the meta a little bit. It might, honestly, I can see people picking this up because of the people don't like Free Folk, so I can see people playing this against Free Folk because they don't like them. But it doesn't do enough into other matchups. Not at all.
Yeah. So there's the skew meme end where you're like, hey, my whole army's untargetable. Like whole swathes of your deck or your abilities that you spent points on is now useless. Which is exceptionally expensive. If you're talking about 4 units, then that's 8 points. Like you've sacrificed a whole Blade Men unit just to like have that ability plus Dauntless. And I think when we talk about the reality of what does and doesn't work, it's pretty mean. There is another discussion where you can say, well, I'm gonna up until this point definitely. This idea and this concept of, just like mega units, like unstoppable units that can't be beaten, have effectively not existed at all. Yes, there are incredibly powerful units. There are very aggressive units. We've talked in the past about, way back in 1.6, there were units that could one-shot stuff, right? And like can't be stopped in that way. But a unit that can grind and nothing can turn their abilities off and nothing can kill them and nothing can influence them, nothing can stop it, is another way of using this guy. But I struggle to think that they exist. Like the first thing that comes to mind is Rose Knights because of the use with Dauntless, right? Dauntless is the thing that they lost.
Yep.
They still have Deadly Bloom, which is when they heal, they deal the wound. So the Dauntless plays into that. Plus the Boisterous Charisma says, okay, well, like that unit, which is really, really tough, but generally ignored for XYZ reason. Maybe you switch off its abilities. Maybe you do this or that, or slow them down, or just use orders to trap them, stuff like that. No, none of that works. But now we're talking about a 9-point unit. I still think that we're just like, well, that's just not enough to be worthwhile.
No, that's the big thing, is that the high points cost of this at 2 points with the units you want to use it on. My initial thoughts were not necessarily Rose Knights, but going down much more kind of like meta side of Queen's Men in Stannis. With Stannis RTK bringing Dauntless currently, OTK bringing Dauntless currently, for the heal on QMs for the Mel Jackin engines that we see. I can't myself see this in Queen's Men taking them to 9 points to then act as the engine. I think it's just too much.
Yeah. I mean, Marwyn wants him in Stagnites for 10 points. You'll always keep your resilience, pretty much, I think.
Yeah.
There are other things but like resilience is one-time use. It's limited. I don't ever see myself buying him at 2 points. Never once.
Ariakas, because we all know that Ariakas plays against Enline, and we all know that Enline plays a lot of Lannister. Ariakas saying it doesn't stop Tywin Bomb. Yeah, it doesn't stop Tywin Bomb. I don't think...
Very first thing he does is switch off all abilities.
Except, this is actually important, ironically, you can't switch off Boisterous Charisma because it's innate.
Oh, good. Innate, yeah.
So you can't switch off
Boisterous... It's not an influence effect.
No. So you lose all your other abilities. You just can't be affected by any more shit. But yeah, you'd still get Tywin bombed, and you would still stop your other defensive abilities if you have any. I tell you where I definitely wouldn't put this. I almost certainly would not put this in Golden Company Swordsman. Because I think that is a 9 point. No, that
absolutely dead on arrival.
That's a 9 point unit that's doing no work whatsoever. Yeah, I mean...
No, never, don't try it.
Dauntless is good. Boisterous Christmas... I actually don't think Boisterous Christmas is a bad ability.
Everything's good, Mickey. Everything has to come with a cost. Dauntless is not a good 1 point ability.
It's not.
It is a good half-point ability. It's good when it comes with motivated by coin for 1 point. Good when it comes with some other thing for 1 point. It's not a 1 point ability in itself, and Boisterous Charisma is not bringing the rest of that 2 point value.
I agree. Honestly, it's a 2 point attachment, and like we have said time and time again, 2 point attachments are generally speaking bad. You go if someone ever shows you a 2 point attachment and you know it's 2 points, you should, before you switch the card over to actually look at the abilities, you should already be thinking, when I read this, I have to be blown away. I have to think, that combination of abilities is really good. Best example I can bring to anybody right now is what we've currently got in Free Folk. You give Warcry and Stalwart for 2 points, and you go, that's a good combo. They work together, that works. If I had to pay 2 points for Tormund every single time, because I didn't have adaptive, even that would be like, that's a hard sell. Like, that's a hard 2 point sell, and it's good. Again, Free Folk, Harmer, Sentinel, and +1 move pivot thing. That combo of abilities, amazing. Right? For 2 points, God, that's a hard sell. You've got to really want to do it. Are there any good Free Folk, any good 2 point attachments outside of Free Folk? Well, I think those are the only 2 good Free Folk attachments at 2 points. I think Rattle Shirt's hilarious, but I don't actually think he's that good.
We don't see him a lot. Like, I would say that the
Ramsey Theon. He actually, for 2 points now, is probably playable. I do actually think he is, and we do see him a lot.
Yeah, okay, in very specific cases.
Yeah.
What about the various what are they called? Blood Riders. Do we think any of the Blood Riders, like, we just don't see them though? Like, it's like, so no, they're not good.
Ricaro. I feel like Ricaro's the most picked one. The guy that lets you do.
He's the one with Sentinel, right?
Yeah, in Vets or whatever it is. We sometimes see him. Or you see, I think someone saw him in Flayed Men actually, which was hilarious. But Vargo might be the only playable 2-point attachment as well. Yeah, Vargo at 2 points because of his Assassinate might be decent. I know Baratheon's quite like Loras for 2 points as well. But for all of these things, notice the common theme here, right? For 2 points, you're bringing something for a very specific reason. Sentinel, which is a decent ability on cavalry, especially Flayed Men, and can't be weakened. Very good on Flayed Men. We've got Ramsey, who Fueled by Slaughters, pretty good. He comes with a panic token like AoE, that's pretty good. And he has another ability, Intimidating Presence, which Intimidating Presence is a very good ability. So yeah, Ramsey's reasonable. The other one we mentioned, who else? Loras, Expert Duelist with precision. Vargo.
I mean, Doug brings up Jamie,
Duelist,
who again has Assassinate, but like I would say, he's at the very tail end of that because his other ability that comes with it doesn't have enough synergy or enough value. So
Ilya saying the Carl 2-pointer with Stalwart and Expert Duelist again. Usually we don't see it because Asher Carl for 2 is probably better, but actually Carl on his own is. Carl on his own for 2 points isn't a terrible thing. If you don't want Warcry, synergizes better with the like Silence Men. You don't want to set their morale to 5; it's pointless. John 2-point attachment.
Like 2 points just doesn't happen for an attachment. You can't. You get more from increasing your unit cost from 5 to 7 or 6 to 8 or 4 to 6 or whatever point cost range than the 2 points brings. So it's just not worthwhile. It's not a useful use of your points. And this isn't a useful way to spend 2 points in attachments either. Even after you've got to that point, those 2 abilities aren't cutting it. Which is you know what? At least it's not a neutral. At least it's not a neutral attachment, which comes in a weird box, which suddenly now everybody wants 2 or 3 copies of in all their lists. So again, I'm not sad that he's shit. I've come to expect loads and practically every attachment that's unnamed, especially in the 2-point range, but pretty much in most ranges. Like it arrives and you're just like, no, worthless. I'm not spending those points on it. There are already good attachments in the 1-point range, or there's no point in spending these points on attachments. So I had 0 expectations that this guy would have any impact on the game, and I think that he'll have less impact than I thought he even might.
I think we'll see lists. I think we'll see him, and we'll see lists going to this Boisterous Charisma meme. I was half tempted to play it with Renly Paramount and Stormlands because I really like Renly Paramount and Stormlands. I think he's actually not trash. Personally, I quite like his cards and stuff. But just because I like it doesn't mean it's good. And I don't think this is good.
It's not good.
No. But I tell you what, right? If you want to run counter lists to something that's fucking you up in your local club or in your local scene or whatever, and someone relies on like orders and things like this to do anything against you, and one day you turn up with a unit full of these, who gives a shit if you win or lose? It just fucks that guy over.
If you want to piss off a Lannister player, just do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's all you want out of your games, then yeah, go for it.
Yeah. And you know what? There is a lot to say about sometimes just turning up with a list. If you know the player and you know what they're going to play, turning up with a list that just fucks it in the ass, even if it's not a good list, but just to be like, by the way, this exists. Fuck you. Yeah, there's, everyone's allowed that moment. There we go. Golden Company Officer. Just as charismatic as Renly. Anyway. So,
Money can buy you anything.
Carlo, then, money can buy you anything. With that statement, how many boxes of War Elephants and Golden Company officers are you buying? Sorry, Golden Company Swordsmen. I shouldn't say the officer.
I believe. I mean, I ordered them. I ordered just like way before I ever see the rules. So I believe I have 2 crossbowmen, 2 swordsmen, and 1 elephants on order. Turns out, probably, yeah, sure. That could be a brilliant trash tier Golden Company army on the table.
That's a 37-point list right there. You can finish that
Yeah,
off with a Golden Company officer.
Can't even buy an NCU.
You know what? Do you know what would be absolutely memes? If you run Golden Company officers in Golden Company crossbowmen. 10-point units that do basically fuck all. What did you do this game? The same damage output as Lannister crossbowmen.
Who I've got a newfound respect for, to be fair, but
yeah, but for 4 more points. Yeah, no, sadness. Anyway, yeah, no, that's the Golden Company. The crossbowmen are, as people have said now, and I know they've been in the wild for a long time. I have some myself. The models are quite nice, actually. I quite like them. The crossbowmen are, to put it bluntly, ultimate sadness.
Entirely forgettable. That's the thing. All of these are just entirely forgettable. And I think that all of these are only gonna win a game when your opponent forgets what they do and lets you use all of your abilities to the maximum potential because you forgot what those abilities were and you discounted the unit and couldn't be bothered to read the card.
The thing is, what abilities? I haven't actually got that many.
Sensible, right? Like they can shift. That you can attack something, which allows them to shift into a range that you didn't think that they'd be able to get a shot, and then suddenly something happens, and then
something happens. Even then, some magic happens, and the Golden Company suddenly do something amazing.
Yeah, they shift, and then magic, right? I don't know what the magic part is. They shift, and something that you weren't expecting is now worse than you thought it was going to be. I know they shift and suddenly they have your flank or your rear or they can make a shot or you. Okay, here you go. Here's your magic. I've got it. You attack something, they shift onto an objective that you didn't think that they could, and they score a victory point and they win the game.
Whoa!
Yeah,
why?
Mind-boggling.
Why were you that close to the unit of Golden Company crossbowmen? Why has the game got that close? Yeah.
Because Golden Company, man, they're good. They're good because that elephant absolutely popped off.
Do you know what I thought you were going to say?
Best unit.
I thought the magic was going to be you'd kill a unit or whatever, and then the magic would be the war elephant goes to activate and charge you, and then fails the morale test. And the magic was the Golden Company did nothing.
Maybe the magic is Sentinel lets the Golden Company crossbowman get back within range of the elephant.
What a play!
So that the elephant can activate.
What an absolute play!
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Absolute plays of the game.
Imagine putting yourself in long range of a friendly unit just so you can do an action at some point in the game. Anyway, I think we've fully exhausted the fact that Golden Company crossbowmen are entirely forgettable. Swordsmen are fine, and elephants will always be remembered because elephants exist, and people always like putting beasts of burden or big monsters on the field. If I see any of these atop table late round event list, so someone who's going 5-1 or something, or 6-0 in a big event with these, any of the Golden Company stuff, I'll say, you know what, I'll have a look at that, I'll have a think about that. Maybe there's something about them that I'm not seeing. Until that happens, I don't think I'm ever going to. No. The only one I actually think is worth any thought are the Swordsmen.
Yeah, I agree. And and 7-point infantry units that have a bit more grinding bite than you expect them to are not what define the game right now.
No. So then, Carlo, when can we expect these added to the stats builder? Because that's what everyone's going to be jumping for joy, being like, "Oh my god, when are these going to be in the builder?" Because I really want to play.
I don't know. I don't know what's going on with it. Is it ever worth waiting for War Council these days? Is it? We'll see. We'll see. There aren't really the images worthwhile putting in. But yeah, you know what? That's how forgettable they are. They actually came out, and honestly, I didn't even think to put them in the builder because I honestly didn't think anybody would want to field them. Obviously, some people will want to, you know. But yeah, sure. We'll put some kind of placeholder in for them relatively soon because
we can get images.
Why not?
Yeah. Evil Sponge does actually bring out the last thing we'll say on these guys. Unless they make some commander that makes them cheaper. And we've said that we've been this.
Think that they're going to make them cheaper?
Like honestly, if we look at how bad these things are, like not so much the Swordsman and not so much the Mammoth or the War Elephant, but definitely the Crossbowman, I could see them releasing a commander that reduces the cost of these. Otherwise, I really think they're unplayable.
I think that's a really bad avenue for them to go down, and one that I think that they'd be really good at avoiding that silly pitfall, which effectively means that unit is unplayable with everything other than that commander. Because 1 point is such a huge monumental shift to the power level of a unit in this game that the minimum you can reduce them by is too much of a reduction. They go from being unplayable to amazing. They go from being the best thing in the game to the worst thing in the game. If you lose no abilities, I would be way more okay with a commander giving every unit that has a certain affiliation a new ability, right? Like, because you can give abilities that aren't worth a point. And more specifically, you can give abilities, you can give as many abilities as you want. They could be worth 1, 2, 3 points, whatever you think that they're worth, but they haven't changed the list building dynamic yet, right? But as soon as you reduce something's cost by 1, it shifts the whole way that you can build with them, the whole way that you can look at that list. And I really don't think that they will. I think that every time people see units and they're not that well costed, people's instinctive reaction is, oh, they could bring out a commander which will make them the right price. And I'm just like, why would they do that? Like, when have they ever indicated that that is something which is kind of on the cards? So
it does bring a small glimmer of a thought of a hope to my eyes, and this really is clutching at straws that are probably ethereal anyway. Are we finally going to see neutrals have potentially a neutral only list building mechanic or commander type released, where we can actually finally see somebody go, right, if you take the Golden Company in a neutral faction, here's something to at least alleviate the pain that is taking these units. Because we didn't actually talk about it, at 14 points as the minimum unlock for an elephant, that basically means that your neutral allowance in every other faction is nearly entirely gone. Your best bet is like picking up Baelish as your last thing, or maybe it's a Tycho or something.
Generally speaking, I don't think that that's as big an issue as it used to be. You know, I don't think that neutrals are as prevalent as they were. Flayed Men have now. Well, no, I think Flayed Men have found acceptable replacements in Champions of the Stag, in new Lance Cavalry rules. You know, like, they're not the only thing that we see anymore. They're not everybody's cavalry. They're now some people's cavalry. I'd still say that I see more Flayed Men than I see Knights of Castle Rock, but I don't see more Stark Blade Men than I see Tully Cavaliers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's incredibly wishful thinking, and I'm very nervous. And like, I'm not saying that neutrals aren't wildly underpowered, and like, I'm not saying that neutrals don't have just like an incredibly long running problem, which is how do you ever balance them when if their units are good, everybody else has them too, and if they're bad, then all they have is bad units. But I am not pro them moving in a direction where neutrals have some different point building mechanic because I more believe that they would get it wrong than I believe that they would improve the game.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It's a unfortunate hangover from Mother of Dragons, right? In that we saw it happen before. It was really bad. But let's just take a moment. The stuff they've released a Golden Company here, while underwhelming, it does show me personally, and adds actually a little bit of, like you've said, it does actually instill some confidence in me that they are looking at how things are balanced now and how that they are points costed, and they are trying to err on the side of caution nearly always. That could be a sign of negative as well. But actually, again, I think that's positive. There could be an errata that says, you know what, these crossbowmen are just terrible at 7. At 8, we'll bring them down to 7. And at least that might make them playable. And if that's if they just say, look, guys, we released them at this because we thought they might be too good, so we erred on the side of caution. We were wrong. We reduced the cost. I don't think anybody in the community would be like, oh my god, that's awful. I think everyone would be like, yeah, fair enough. If you thought these were going to be good, fair enough. I've not got a problem with that. Unlike undercosting, having them plague the game and then saying, oh, we're raising the cost now. That's always worse because we have to put up with the whole plaguing the game bit.
Absolutely.
People chatting in chat about the points shift. We've had this conversation a few times. I don't know if we want to expand on it much, but talking about raising the points
It's a tired conversation. Yeah. It's a tired conversation because, at least in my opinion, I might be wrong, but I believe that the community are overwhelmingly in favor of better points granularity, and the game designers are not. So why bother discussing it anymore? You know what I mean? I don't think it's going to happen, guys. Why keep talking about it? It would be great. It's really wishful thinking. I think that the thing that what Atomic Mass Games do with Legion at 400, 800 points, gives them so much scope for upgrades that cost 2 points, 3 points, 5 points. Do you know what I mean? And they're all very specific things. We see them bring out 6 monthly or annual kind of update erratas, and it's this guy now costs 3 less points. It's that cannot possibly happen. You can't send something from 72 points down to 69 points. That was actually an accident. You can't, because that granularity does not exist for Song. And so if you want to readdress something's power level, you have to rewrite its abilities. You cannot just be okay, just dial it in a little bit, just dial it down until it gets right. Whereas if our units cost 20 points, 21 points, or 19 points, you can just tick that up, tick that down. Oh, nobody uses that unit anymore. Okay, send it down a point, or and then you can actually get a much better feel for what each ability's cost is, because people will buy the things that are worth 1 point. They will buy the things that are worth 2 points. They'll buy the things worth 3 points, and you'll be like, yeah, people are willing to pay 4 points for Relentless. Turns out that they're willing to pay 1 point for Dauntless, or they're not, or these kind of things. So but it would have to be up at 100 points or something like that before we start to see any real significant improvement. It's not going to happen.
Just again, another thing that's cropped up for me. Craig Grisalog Norek has posted a list in our Patreon's list building chat and challenges Carlo to touch this, I think. which is a Thornwatch with Renly, Lord Paramount of the Stormlands, Stormcrow Mercenaries with a Golden Company officer, Highgarden Pikemen with a Golden Company officer, and Rose Knights with the Golden Company officer with Courtney, Marge, and Baelish. That is about as good as list building gets.
I'm surprised he's managed to get still to 7 activations, and yeah, okay.
Still not good.
Yeah, like it just the pure quality of the seven units or the 4 combat units that you managed to bring means that it's like, I guess if I just bring units that aren't reliant on specific things, then you'll just win the 1v1 matchups.
Just pointing out there that Groose as well there gets the opportunity, being a patron, to call Carlo out in a very public way, without it being too public, where Groose looks like an idiot. The real memes exist in the Patreon channels. So, yeah, cool. Any other news that we came across? Any other topics of discussion in chat? No. So, the other thing that happened, which I
don't know what this is.
You do probably know what this is. Last week, Simon put out an announcement to say about US National Championships and how you can organise the organised play team. Some people are mental, so they just organise these things. Like, as soon as they see an email of contacts, they're like, I'm immediately going to email this and check if it is real or not. And they emailed, and it redirected them and said, this email cannot be delivered because this account has been whatever, is not accepting emails from outside sources. So
yes, it seems a case of the most the most terrible organizational timing possible, in that the only contact they've had with the community of recent, or only publication or only promotion of the game, was to say, don't forget about nationals, contact the organizer of organized play exactly the same time when they got rid of their organized play guy.
Yes.
Literally the same day or week or whatever it was that they got rid of him, they made an announcement that you should email him.
Yeah. They fucked that one up. There's no,
they fucked that one up.
Yeah, there's no buttering that.
I don't know the full context of it. I believe that your email is picked up by somebody else. I believe you may still get an email back saying that your email's been bounced. I think that maybe you'll eventually get an email from somebody else. Adam Lavelle is his name, right?
Yeah.
Who's the guy that we saw on the Gamma video, was it?
I believe so. The head of he's the VP of marketing, I believe.
Yeah.
So he did that.
Yeah, I think that he will pick up your email and then respond to you and say, "Oh, by the way, I got your email." I don't know, because I know somebody else got a response from Adam Lavelle, and then other people, and I thought, oh right, so they've fixed it. That automatically bounces to Adam Lavelle now. But people still continue to send messages to organized play, and they continue to get responses basically saying, this email's defunct, you can't use it, it's no longer contactable.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether or not it's actually fixed. I don't know if you still get a don't email this email automatic response. But yeah, it's a classic. It's a classic CMON move at this point. Every time they try and do right, every time they try and promote the game, every time they try and say, by the way, remember we've got US nationals. Remember you can sign up. Remember you can run a regionals. I think that it's always tripping themselves up. Always falling at the very first hurdle.
I mean, it is always worth remembering that us here are very clued in with the game and what's going on, so we perhaps don't give them kind of like the slack that sometimes might be wanted to be given in a lot of these scenarios, or perhaps even deserved in some of these scenarios. That's a bit of a stretch, but but also, newer players wouldn't necessarily have recognized that and seen that. So this isn't something that a lot of newer players or those less involved in the game would really get affected by. Um, but it is ultimately still affecting the existing community and those that are trying to do the right thing. Luke Belisarius in chat, we'll come on to him. Kurt, who was on a couple months back, he was at a regional event and he doesn't know how to submit the results for that. Multiple regionals, which we'll get onto later in the episode, did run over the weekend for US nationals, and they're now sat in a bit of a limbo state, being like, well, how do we tell people that this happened? And I know we've actually been thankful somewhat, and we can reveal this piece of news as far as I'm aware, that Simon have got back to Chris for the GT in London, and they have said that they are committed to helping with significant product for prizing. That is a statement from the actual email, which Chris has shared in the London Grand Tournament Discord, which I know that people were worrying for. So we've had confirmation that support is still in theory happening, but it's not. It's looking through water that's murky, that's then put in a dirty glass, that's then been put in a fishbowl of other murky water, but different.
I don't. You're never gonna know a really clear, transparent of what's going on with their employees or why things are happening. Like no company will ever be that transparent with their customer base, right? Like I think there is something of an expectation, a weird level of expectation between, like a tabletop community who are effectively just customers of a company and like what they expect the company, how open they expect that company to be with their inner workings. Me specifically, like I have pretty high expectations for how transparent I expect them to be. They are never ever going to tell us why Robert Fulkerson no longer is working in that position anymore. It seems from the outside that they still have at least a relatively high level of interest and commitment to organized play. It doesn't seem so far like it's like, right, well, we're canning off organized play. It hasn't been the success we wanted it to be. I would have been incredibly surprised with the timing of that if they had, because considering what they seem to have put into building towards the US Nationals, the recent announcement of a World in 2023, like why would you announce and put in all this work and not wait for it to see if it's had any kind of traction and any kind of like positive impact before deciding to pan it off? That would all be very, very odd. If anything, it seems like they possibly, I'm pure speculation. I have no ideas of they're working or what's been going on. Almost more from a semi-positive outlook that they felt that the team that they had in place wasn't going to be able to fulfill the ideas that they had in the way that they wanted them, and therefore are looking to put something new in place, something. But I would assume, and this is just my assumption based on all their previous actions, shall we call them, rather than things they've said, I would believe that they're probably outsourcing it effectively to Asmodee. Is what I think is basically going on. They're effectively saying, look, we're not going to do this anymore. Asmodee, you just do it for us.
Yeah.
In the same way that they moved their warehousing, they were just like, Asmodee, you do it. The distribution, Asmodee, you do it. We will just concentrate on like making some game rules, and then you do everything else as much as possible. I think that's more likely what's going on with organized play. I think we'll see it re-implemented like more definitively under just the Asmodee umbrella, which I don't think is a bad thing necessarily. I haven't been that involved in Asmodee organized play stuff in the past, but they have enough experience and a track record of running a game, things like Legion, Armada, all their trading card games, obviously from the Fantasy Flight side of things. So it could possibly bring it in the right direction. It
Hmm.
could also be a really rocky time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, I guess we'll see, won't we, in due course. Um, all right. Another piece of news, by the way, which I didn't. I I frequent Discords, so I know what this is. But something that is just something people might not know about. There have been people venturing into the 3D printing side of Song of Ice and Fire, which has essentially been a non-explored region, really.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, very, very underdeveloped by comparison to a lot of the other games of
specifically
similar.
Legion. Legion. I
Yeah,
mean,
like
Marvel
Legion.
Crisis Protocol has it, but Legion's 3D printing atmosphere is huge. You can basically get anything you want in Legion without ever having to buy anything from the company. It's insane.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Marvel Crisis Protocol as well. Like I think that's a bit more difficult because basically the Marvel Crisis Protocol sculpts are of such a high quality that like it makes it's a very high standard. Also, large models,
mhm,
like it's such a high level for the 3D print to like have to replicate. Plus, the rate at which they release models like means that there's very little missing from the MCP kind of universe. They effectively end up being alt sculpts very, very quickly because people are like, oh, why don't we get a insert model here, and then like just 3 months later, that same model is actually fully announced and released.
mhm.
Legion, on the other hand, Star Wars has such a depth of characters that they, will never get through to some of your favorite characters. They'll never get through to some of the more niche races, and so alternate sculpts are way easier for people to implement and kind of do. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that it's thrived in the Legion space, and Song's been very absent of it. A lot of people discuss about the fact that like Song 3D printing really brings to the fore just the value offered in a
Mhm.
12 to 13 model box from Song. Um, Never mind. I mean, obviously, most collectors and people with large armies and stuff, they have trays that they can reuse and spare and stuff like that. But like trays become a bit of an issue. If you're going to print loads of stuff, you do need to have them, and they can be useful for storage and stuff like that. But these are lovely models. I think that they are like just straight up better than the Pyromancer models supplied by Simon.
Yeah, yeah, I quite like them. They actually have a lot more character as well.
Yeah.
Quite a lot more character. Um, so yeah, those are pretty well done. Those are got by Aaron uh, on the main Discord. I forget his name, but his go by Aaron Greyjoy. All of the various different iterations of that name available in the builders channel on the main Discord there, and also available on Etsy. He has them available. I don't know if he actually does 3D sells the actual 3D print himself, as in you can buy the 3D print and print them yourselves. But he actually does sell them on Etsy, where you can buy them and he'll deliver them to you, print them off and deliver them um, to order. So that's an option there. If you want to. Obviously, it would be just supporting someone who's not affiliated with anything with the game really, just a person in the community. But I'm sure if you ask him, he'll put up 3D files to print. I'm sure at some point. Um, yeah. So there you go. Happening. It's good to see. It's nice to see. Um, all right.
I think in general, because of the fact that the models come pre-supplied, pre-colored,
Mhm.
pre-assembled, all these things mean that Song as a whole, even though I think there's huge crossover with people who play other things, um, I think that Song as a whole is relatively low on in terms of like people making conversions, people making 3D sculpts, people doing like really unique things. Basing seems to be like the one real expression of modeling that that is common to a lot of people, right? Like base is where they decide to go wild, where they decide to like really show their inventiveness and show their creativity, and create closer to diorama kind of units rather than just like static 12 models in a row. But I think that's quite interesting, and I think that is a lot defined by the fact that it is pre-built models. It makes conversions a lot more difficult, or more to the point, I think that it really gets the creative juices going when a person has to assemble the model anyway themselves. Like they're already starting to think, oh, I might just swap this bit with another bit. I might do a different thing here. But when you really have to go out a model and disassemble it before you can convert it, before you can start to make changes, it changes most people's mindset that it's no longer a really quick and easy thing that they want to implement.
Yeah, definitely. All right then. So, should we move on to some tournament news?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll quickly go through some tournament news. You're not allowed to use them in most tournaments most of the time. Yeah, strictly speaking, you wouldn't necessarily be able to, Stephen. But it depends. Like, some people would be like, if those were your only things, if they were 3D printed and alternative sculpts for this, that, and the other, none of them from official sources, yes, people probably wouldn't be necessarily massively pro that. But if you mixed a couple of those pyromancers into a unit of existing pyromancers, as a TO, the big thing for any event is, can I clearly identify what they are? And in my opinion, they are clearly identified. Like, there's no way I'm confusing and saying, oh, that looks like a Lannister Guardsman now. Like, no, come on. But yes, you wouldn't be allowed to use them in CMON official tournament stuff, potentially. In some cases. So yeah, that is something that is worth noting. But I mean, Carlo, your stance on the GT. I know that obviously proxies and things are discouraged, but would you allow anything that you can definitely say, yes, 100% that is that unit, and it's obvious that it is?
Yeah, the GT, no, we follow the CMON tournament document, which specifically states that a model must be based on a Song of Ice and Fire, CMON, or Dark Sword miniature.
Yeah, okay. That's fair enough.
And I think that's where it all comes from, which is, I think weirdly enough, I would say that the Song of Ice and Fire CMON tournament guideline doc is one of the most successful things they've ever put out. In that, I would say that it's one of the only things that people actually follow, like, and quite vigorously. I've maybe again, maybe it's warped by my view of people who run events through stats, which is where I hear about them, where I understand about them and what they are. Practically everybody uses Swiss because they say to use Swiss. I've basically never found anybody who didn't score it the way that CMON score it. I've never known anybody to have. We've talked about issues which I think that the doc has, that they're not done well. Like, I don't think that like resignations are particularly done that well. And you can talk about whether or not you think that people discuss about whether or not wiping an opponent out should be a crushing victory, all these things, right? Yet, despite the fact that some people have niggles with it here or there, the community, as a 99% broad stroke, accepts the document as just the way events are run. I think by extension to that, people just accept that little line in the document that says models must be CMON or Dark Sword models. And there's very little question about that. And I've seen very, very little proxying, effectively no proxying.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also seen very, very little conversion, even though that is not discouraged or removed from tournament play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair. All right then. So, on to the actual events themselves. We have quite a few things to get through here, so we'll just go through the Hall of Champions. It's easier on the most part. We have a couple of things were mentioned. So we saw Scabman win Battle of the Bar Stewards with his John pairing, strangely enough. So well done there, Scabman. I know that it was a 16-player event happening in Daventry in the UK. So yeah, well done, Scadders. We saw Thranduil, a name that most people may know or heard of, winning with his Night's Watch up at X Planet Games in the now, getting back to tabletop, an attempt at kind of bringing it all back together in Canada. So well done there to Thranduil. And then we saw 3 different regionals, and there is actually a 4th one as well. 4 different regional events happen. We had Zontars win a small one in North California with Baratheon. We had Belisarius, Kurt, winning in Kansas, a 9-player event. And we have Blue Tate winning with his Baratheons in an 18-player event. And that was at Source Regionals, which I believe is in Atlanta. Night's Watch and Baratheon. All weekend, Night's Watch and Baratheon, as it turns out. We'll come on to the other one in a minute. But...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barras have been putting out consistent, stable results for a while now, and
Yeah.
do you know what? Do you know what's interesting? I was actually thinking about it recently myself. And winning tournaments isn't the be all to end all of what an action is, right?
Yeah.
But I think that it says a lot about a faction, right? Like when a faction, as soon as a tournament goes over a certain size, right? Like you pretty much need to have a good build to be able to win it. You are unlikely to be so much better than your opponents that you will be able to win, irrespective of it. Obviously, there are outliers. Winter is coming, going incredibly far with neutrals, shows that even at high levels, with high level play, you can go against the grain. But my own personal thoughts recently, which is where my focus has been, is I actually went through and looked. There are only basically 2 people who have ever won a tournament with Greyjoys. Right? Greyjoys, and loads of people are like, Greyjoy faction rating should be higher. Greyjoys are really, really good. They're not. Greyjoys are not winning events. Even Lannisters and Starks win significantly more events. I think neutrals win more events than Greyjoys do. Mikhail and another name that I forget, but I did recognize his name, are practically the only people won tournaments with Greyjoys.
A lot of the... So we got a guy in G-Lot in Finland.
Aftar. Okay, yeah, 3. We call it
Aftar's,
3.
I'm guessing he's one of the Polish group.
Yeah.
With names like that. Mikkel. And then I imagine all of the other ones are typically relatively small events. Which isn't to take away from those wins. But when you... Abarash, winner House of Orcs, I guess, is the only other one from the Italian scene.
Two's an exaggeration, of course, but really, you have to go really far back before you see Greyjoys winning events.
Yeah, consistently.
I think that I find it very interesting, and it was something of a nail in the coffin for me, where I was just like, nah, I'm not getting anywhere with Greyjoys at the moment.
Pretty sad, isn't it? Have you thought about being better? I've heard that being better helps.
No, to be honest, I don't.
You can't get better. It must be Greyjoys. It can't be you. No, I do know what you mean. They are pretty sadness in terms of results. So yeah, Aftar Polish, he's up there. He's a 20th ranked player at the moment. That we've seen.
How many people were at your regional, Kurt? I don't think it was Golden Cup size, was it?
We'll find out. Belisarius That looks like a silver cup to me, unless the other one's
No,
off.
yeah, I mean, I think you're a long way off a golden cup.
No, he might win US Nationals, right? Oh, that won't be on stats. Oh well. I also will apologise straight away. Evan pointing that out in chat there. I do apologise. The Source Regional was the one in Minnesota. I do apologise, and it was the Chaos Ladder, which is the Atlanta one. So apologies there. That's my fault. Made a mistake. But yeah. So
Kurt, you're very,
turn
very lucky to even get a silver. You're only one person above getting a bronze cup with 9 people. So
Kurt going way too big for his boots. Anyway, yes. So well done to all those players there for winning US regional spots. Kurtz goes down to second place, so I think with Cyrus in his regional. And some of them, I mean, it's good to see the Minnesota. We've got 18 players there at the Minnesota one. Also, shout out to Scott being there as well. Scott Walter, who many of you may know. Scott's name. Do you know who Scott is, Carlo? Or is he? Are you
no.
too big and important for him? That's Miniac. Just showing that he's actually still playing, still attending events and things like that, even if his content isn't necessarily.
Oh yeah, I recognise S-Dub. That's what he appears in the Discord, main Discord as, right?
Yeah. The only reason I mention that is because we were talking about him last week, and so it is good to see that he's still playing, which is fantastic. We also have the Chaos Regional. So this hasn't been closed off yet. The event is finished. They just haven't locked it yet, and the person hasn't gone to the Hall of Fame. But this was won by Red Letter Office, otherwise known as or Colin Glossis, with his Free Folk. And this is a very strange event because this is actually very Suns counter US, really, in that Baratheons didn't appear anywhere near the top, really. You had one person going 4 and a draw and a loss with Baratheon. And apart from that, there really was not good Baratheon turnout, like low Baratheon numbers and generally not good Baratheon performance, right? They had a relatively big 19% Free Folk entry, and Free Folk had an 78% win rate across the event.
Mm-hmm. And they take 1, 3, and 4, which in that size event should technically, I don't know whether or not they will be, but they take 3 of the 4 qualifying spots from the regional, right?
Yes, 3 of the 4. There was only one Free Folk player outside of those 3, who ended 9th, which is still in the top half of the table. Free Folk in general played a very strong week. How often did they play Mance? Majority of the time, Mance was of the non-mirror games. Mance was played 11 to Steer's 4, but Steer, Mance, Steer. Colin, the winner, run Steer most lists, most games. Bran ran Mance, Tormund, Mance, so majority Mance. And Steve, Sans Mercy, ran Mance. Fair enough. He ran Mance every time. But
also, a very interesting event where
both lists are Mance.
Nobody goes undefeated.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this was a very interesting event in general. This was a 5-round event in one day. Right?
Oh wow.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Doesn't the regionals document require regionals to be one day?
I might be.
I don't know.
But they smashed it. 21 players, 5 rounds. That's a couple of issues to start with. But the reason I bring this one up is Lucas Aurelius is a name that you guys may have heard on this channel before. Do you know what he's popular for, apart from playing Stark? Where have you heard that name?
I know the name very well, but I can't tell you. I don't know what you're looking for.
You don't know. You still haven't found what I'm looking for, Carlo. It's this man here. The man who painted up this lovely model. He actually won Best Painted. Guess what for, Carlo?
For that model.
For this model. So, I think we can now sufficiently say that by proxy, Carlo has won Best Painted.
I won Best Painted already, thank you.
Where did you win Best Painted? In what world?
I won Best Painted with multiple different armies.
When? Oh, was this like in some like backwater village where no one goes to, like Liverpool?
I don't remember. Yeah,
I don't know. It's the first time I've ever seen you win Best Painted or heard about you winning Best Painted. So clearly you haven't bragged about it, which anyone who wins Best Painted should definitely brag about it. Shout out to Dan at our club who constantly wins Best Painted stuff. But there you go. Look at that trophy, by the way.
That's I've never won a trophy like that. I'll tell you that for sure.
That's actually probably better than. I mean, no offense, Lucas. Like, I think that's better than the model. I think that's probably better than anything in the Game of Thrones range, to be honest. So yeah, that trophy's sick. But yeah, that was the winner of Best Painted. So there you go. So anyway, that was our little diatribe for this week. Yes, lots of good events, and it seems like good turnout. We've seen 4 or 5 events there, 8 or 9 minimum, up to like nearly 20 or over 20 players in the US. So this weekend was, at least 50 people, I think, contending for spots at US regionals in going to US nationals, and that's a positive thing. There is a lot positive to be said about that. It's fantastic for us to see finally the evidence that the US scene exists and is present, more than just something that kind of people say exists but never turns out for events. It is fantastic to see that, using the site as well, and games coming in. So I really hope that continues as well. John Caspian saying, you were JC in the tournament? Cool. Flipping serious. Seen your name a couple of times. And Man 5 rounds. It was a lot in one day, but it was super fun. And yes, the trophy was done by Colin as well. So cool. That's fantastic.
It's impressive trophy.
Yeah. So after that result, it's always worth looking in it now, just because it's interesting to see, isn't it? Where it shakes the factions after everything, and it's basically no change after everything settles. Everything just kind of stays the same. Free folk.
I believe Eldon's currently sat in number 1. Actually, I think.
Oh, he's just
he just gone under Mance. Since I last checked about an hour ago or something like that.
0.011 under Mance. So yeah, I mean, we can synonymously say that Eldon and Mance at the moment are the 2 top commanders of the game by ELO. I do personally believe that Mance is stronger. I do think that Mance is probably the most powerful NC commander in the game.
I don't see Eldon continuously doing tournament results, right? Like when the Baratheon faction themselves are winning, they're not Eldon-based list. I think that he is incredibly consistent right now, and I think that he is a very powerful commander. And I think that battle endurance is just a game-defining card, particularly for Baratheons. But I do question, whether or not Eldon is necessarily the top meta pick into tournament play for Baratheons, and those that are regularly winning are mostly doing it with the Stannis side, which is quite interesting. I do believe, though, that he has a more consistent play style, a more consistent set of results, and that those who win the tournament are playing, a higher risk strategy when they go in for this panic style list. But that's just my perception currently of the faction, and I think that they're in a really interesting spot and do actually have multiple viable builds, which is the best thing that we can always hope for.
It is actually very funny when you look at the 3 Baratheon winners from the weekend, right? And we say this all the time, right? it's great for people to win, but the size of event can matter to some extent as to how strong the players are. The players at the event can dictate how strong the event is as well, and that can all have an impact on what is strong and what is not. Local meta is local meta for a reason. Not everywhere subscribes to the same idea. We saw, Colin Red Letter Office and his area seem to be on the Mance Free Folk train, which I personally believe is more a reflection of the overall meta, but doesn't necessarily mean that it is. We see Baratheons doing well, we see Night's Watch doing well, which again are not far off what we know as being pretty good. But then we look at the event lists, and this is really funny. With North California, it was Renly. The two different versions. Belisarius, it was Stannis, Rightful Heir, and Paramount of the Stormlands. And Blue Tate was Axel and Rightful Heir. So we didn't see Eldon in any of those combos. Mm-hmm. And we only really see the doubling up of Rightful Heir, who by no means is the most popular. OTK is by far the more popular pick that we are commonly seeing at the top end. And of all things, I'm a happy guy. Renly Lord Paramount getting some love. I love him. I absolutely think he's great.
When did Mickey become a Renly boy? Jesus Christ!
No, I hate Renly. I just think Renly Charismatic Heir is fun. I think he's really interesting to play. I don't give a shit about Renly in the real world. Just Paramount the Stormlands. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I mean, that's really good to see, but no Eldons, right? Mm-hmm. Like you were saying, no Eldons. Yeah. Which, if we are to go off, Kurt saying in chat there, Renly 2 just to get his badge. Fair. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, Kurt already has a qualifying spot, so Kurt wasn't even necessarily out there for pure wins and nothing else.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, from an ELO perspective, if we were to give advice to somebody playing Baratheons right now, if they want to win games and win events and things like that, my best advice would be to take Eldon as one of your two commanders. Statistically, he should be doing well. It's odd that he's not winning events, but also winning games. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that plans out. Kurt saying he loves them so much he's going to spam Golden Company captains. I might do. Mm-hmm. Might do.
You basically said you were gonna.
Yeah. Why not? For the memes, for the memes. Yeah, I mean, it's good to see. It's good to see. Other classics are up there as well. Steer's seen a bit of a rise as well, which, I run Steer in my second list. I think Steer is very good. But the meta is overall looking still relatively healthy.
Yeah, I believe so. We've even seen Lannisters claw their way back up. It seems that Kevin particularly seems to be having a slow, grinding, positive impact upon the faction. That it's slowly clawing its way up there. He is definitely giving a bit of life back to some particular builds. We talked about it. I do think that Predictable Maneuvers is such an influential card that actually it can even start to redefine the way Lannisters think about list building. Mm-hmm. Because of it's one of the few cards out there that can actually let you get away with being out activated, while still having some impact on the game state. You're out activated, and so I think that is good to see. I think it's not actually that unexpected, based on when we saw Lannister Heroes 3, everybody just pointed at Kevin and pointed at Adam and said, look, they're better than what's currently available, mm-hmm. Or at least as good as. Right, really gets it into this, brings the faction into having more viable choices. Really not having to lean into, say, like a Tyrion and Roose control pairing. Yep. Other than that, Starks have been up, down, here and there. Greyjoys, like I say, like they're just not quite what people want them to be. Even neutrals having a bit of resurgence there at -42 rather than like -60 odd that they have been.
Yeah.
The whole separation is really not as bad as it has been. I think that like in the last month, their supposed win rate has like catapulted its way up to their heady heights of 50-50, which is a monumental increase over where it previously sat. Large part, they are so little played that you can assign that to almost to individual players, which is always one of the interesting things about neutrals.
Do you think you talked about Greyjoys just briefly there, saying that you found it difficult. You're not. Is it fair to say not actually enjoying Greyjoys that much? In
no,
a lot of senses?
don't enjoy Greyjoys. Partly because partly because of the lists that I run, right? But they're a symptom of the way that I see the faction and the way I use the faction and the way I see the game. So lists play a factor into this, but for me, Greyjoys have too many bad matchups. They have bad matchups against things that like aren't dominant, but they're like effectively skew. They're skew, and they'll just completely fucking destroy you, right? And it's like and that's not enjoyable to me. I don't want to go into the game being a humongous underdog against something which like isn't even. Yeah. It's totally beatable by most factions. It's not even a good list. It's not well, like when Othel dominated the game, and so you're like, well, why didn't you prepare for Othel, right? But when just you are almost exclusively at a huge disadvantage to anybody who's incredibly panic based, when you're at a huge disadvantage to anybody who can put out like incredible spike damage, I think I just don't like. I personally do not like all of their matchups. I kept playing, and I built the faction, and I built it for like what I perceived to be strong into the game. And interestingly, I played them into a lot of what was strong in the game. And I thought, yeah, you know what, this faction does fine. I built like these kind of like very specialist lists that can take on the top in the meta. And then I started just playing them more generically. And then I was like, oh, shit, this is a really bad matchup. And then I'd be like, all right, I think I've learned that one. I've done that one. And then I'd just play another one. I'd be like, no, that's a fucking terrible matchup too. No, this one's a terrible matchup. And suddenly the list of things that I'm like, they're all terrible matchups. And so there's too long a list, and they're terrible for different reasons, that I'm like, I don't think that I can fix the two list pairing for myself to not go into any decent sized tournament and just think, well, if I get the wrong pairing, then I lose. And I hate playing the game in that way. Like I want to walk into every game and say, I have the chance to win this with skill because the matchup is at least relatively even.
Yeah,
you don't have to be the favorite, but I don't want to feel under humongous pressure to make a big play to overturn what is effectively a losing situation from the outset.
It goes back to the Othel question, right? Is that you can go into an Othel game thinking I might be able to win this. You might even hope that you can, but you don't necessarily go into the game thinking, oh, this is good. I'm just like, maybe. Yeah. Like, I'll see how it pans out.
You go in
end of round 2 and you go, no, it's game.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you go into it and you have to think to yourself, oh, if I can just set up like this one really specific situation, then I might be able to steal a win. And that was like the best thing that you could hope for. And it normally revolved around like, if I can do this before he gets XYZ cards out, then like something else can happen. That combined with the fact that I don't like their deck. I just don't like their deck. I don't think that it's good myself. I find it very situational. When it plays well, it plays well. Like the Lannister deck, I understand why they think that certain cards are good and that people can complain about. Even I've seen people complain about the Greyjoy deck as being really, really powerful. And it's like, yes, if every card comes off at the right time and in the right situation. Those situations are so rare and so timing based and so infrequent in well played high level meta. Like if you think about like how often a John Ranger Hunter list ever lets you begin in combat, it's like, well, never, because they always attack and retreat, and so I don't like the way the faction is playing for me. It's not that I'm losing, though. I don't like losing. It's that I don't like the feeling of being too far behind when the game begins into any specific matchup. I moved back to playing some of the other factions that I've been playing just Greyjoys for quite a while now. Good like 10 plus games in a row where I only played Greyjoys, played nothing in between, didn't even really think about any other faction. Went back to playing another faction that I didn't even necessarily think it has an amazing deck, and I was just like, yeah, this is the deck that I prefer. This deck is just better. It is more powerful. I think that it plays better. I think that I'm in more control, and I'm in more control of the game from the outset. And that could just be that I'm not good with Greyjoys. I will hold my hands up and say, other people do win with Greyjoys. They're not a write-off faction. They're not unplayable, but they're not my style, and I've not been enjoying them. So I'm gonna bin them off for quite a while, and I'll come back to them when I think that maybe I can just like sneak a tiny little tournament win, get myself another little bronze cup somewhere, and pretend that I mastered that faction and move on.
So, two-man round robin DWG, right? Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's fair. I'm meddling. I'm meddling between Stark and Greyjoy now, kind of like on and off as my two things to try test out a lot more. Mainly because there's better ELO games in those two, playing them online as well, and they're challenging. But I still have to piece together a neutral physical army as well at some point. But yeah, the last kind of like topic, the last thing I was going to bring up on that, obviously you're saying you shelved them there, and it is this point where I kind of really wanted to start asking you now. You are in the run up to a relatively important part of your year this year. Not life, but a relatively important part of the year for you. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, Carlo plays Ultimate Frisbee like I did. That's how we met many moons ago, when Carlo thought I was actually good at it. There you go.
I never thought he was good.
Yeah, you did. I remember when you took me aside at Durham training the first time I turned up, and I ran around like a headless chicken.
Before or after you threw up?
That was way after that. That was way down the line. But yeah, that was when I was actually fit and healthy. But yeah, he's going to World Championships in the US, hence the reason he's going to be in the US. And of course, at the same trip, Gen Con, in the hopes of the last chance qualifier into Gen Con itself. The hopes.
Hopes and dreams.
Hopes and dreams. Pray for me. So, I'm not going to ask you what faction you're going to take, right? Because
the answer is I actually don't know. The answer is I was intending to play Greyjoys, and I was working on the faction religiously under the idea that I needed to solve them so that I didn't go there and embarrass myself. And I cut them about a week ago and just decided that I'm not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to solve the faction in the next 5 weeks. There is that added aspect to when I say I'm not enjoying them. There was this slight added pressure that I feel like it's one of the first times that there's actually like a time at which I'm like, I must be ready with this faction by this time. And in the past, it as an interesting equivalent example. Are we actually having connection issues for once?
No.
I was just my end.
Yeah.
As an equivalent example, in the past, I did feel like I struggled when I first picked up Targaryens, right? Like Again, Targaryens felt alien to me. Again, I thought, God, I'm never going to be good with this faction. And it took me a little while, and then I came up with a list which nobody had really fielded before. It was a lot more comfortable in the way that I play, a lot more activation control based, a lot more powerful units and weak units complementing each other. And I felt very, very comfortable with that. And actually, I went back to that list relatively recently. A lot of people actually field kind of similar variants on that list these days. I've seen it come up quite a few times. I went back to that list and I was just reminded that, like, actually, by the end, by a certain amount of time, I felt very comfortable with that list. Whereas with the Greyjoys, I had that same initial reaction. I was like, this doesn't feel good. This feels bad. I'm going to build a list the way I build lists. I'm going to build what I think is going to be special about them, the way I want to play them, and the way I want to control the game. And it just never clicked. It isn't clicking. It isn't getting there. And because there's a time point at which I want to be confident and comfortable with the faction that I play, I've had to say, no, I'm not going to be ready. Like the click hasn't happened. If anything, when I first played them, they clicked more, and then I've like overcompensated in the wrong directions. Once I've like started to play some of the less favorable matchups, I've tried to say, okay, but how do I like cover all these bases? And I don't think I can for me right now.
That's fair. Fair.
So I mean, I personally still feel as the Targaryens was the last faction that I played before confidently, and I still feel pretty good with Targs. So Targs are an easy way for me to step back into. I still personally believe that Night's Watch are criminally underutilized in how powerful that they can be. But I don't have loads of experience with Night's Watch because, oddly enough, every time I've played with them, particularly I was playing, back before season 1 was last time I really actively played them and went to a tournament. I picked them up and won straight away and therefore put them down straight away. There was no real exploration of the faction. I felt that they were so simple back then. They were so powerful. I do still think that they are one of the most criminally underexplored, underexploited factions out there, partly because of how powerful they were in season 2021 before season 1. So like there's been very little need for innovation, and I think that some innovation is starting to come along around this idea of John lists with like John in cons and stuff like that. It's much more list building with a like trade-off of this versus this. I'm good at this, but I have a weakness, as opposed to like in the past, it was just like, well, I'm just best in every possible way. Like I have more activations, I have more range, I have better zone control, I have all these kind of things. Baratheons are something which I once was very comfortable with, but their new stuff I haven't had anywhere near enough experience with. I would really need to crunch the new Renly units and decide whether or not I felt that they were good to bring Baratheons. So effectively, it's almost definitely going to fall into one of those three. They're the three that I would feel that I can re-pick up in the next, what is 4 weeks? Like I've got 4 weeks to find a faction, find a pair of lists.
Yeah.
And then also find a person to lend me that army when I arrive in the US. So there is that small limitation too. Like I might turn around and find out that I can't even play that army. So I should nail that down. But I think any of those three, I will feel way more comfortable, and I'll just feel more confident. And I think the confidence going into a matchup and understanding your own deck, understanding your opponent, and how you're going to win any game is very, very important, and I feel way more comfortable using any three of those factions than I would the other 5.
You're not thinking about playing Free Folk then?
No. I mean, I've never competitively tried to play Free Folk. It just feels like the faction that you play, and therefore you don't play anything else. So I don't bother to use that faction.
No, yeah. Model limitations, right? Unfortunately, and the lack of disposable income. But I say neutrals are nearly there, and Greyjoys are kind of there. Yeah, no, you can borrow my free folk anytime, Carlo. Remember that. And then when you beat me in a free folk mirror matchup consistently, or you end up like dominating the free folk, I can sit here and go, I know jack shit. That man is just the expert in everything, which I kind of already believe a little bit anyway. So
Yeah. Clearly not Greyjoys.
Get fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Have you ever thought about this, Carlo? Maybe Horde isn't your playstyle. The man who is so pro activation advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If anything, my problem actually is that I'm too pro activation and don't see. And sometimes just people just put a powerful unit in my face, and I'm like, oh wow, I didn't expect you to do that.
Shit.
So I'm probably going to get absolutely exposed in the US, where people will just shove powerful units in each other's faces.
What you're saying is Gregor, Mad Dog,
Gregor
mounted Behemoth.
Rock,
Gregor mounted Behemoth inside Flayed Men, just running you down and auto 6 charging because they fail their morale checks all the time, eliminating a unit a turn.
Yeah,
that's
probably.
Just gonna beat you.
Would be one of my worst nightmares.
What beat you, Gregor? That is true. For what it's worth, anyone who knows Carlo's early days, this is only really myself or Dan. That is like full circle because the thing of nightmares was watching Carlo put a Lannister army on the field and then put in Gregor Clegane, the solo, back in the day when he was just basically busted.
Bonkers.
And Carlo used to run riot, and then I should have told the story before. The moment Carlo stopped running him, he started losing games, and he was like, "Huh, maybe that is too good." So yeah, full circle, beaten by him. No. Anyway, just out of curiosity, would you think of taking Kevin and Adam potentially in Lannisters or a Lannister combo? You didn't mention Lannisters, and they are
because I feel as far out of practice with Baratheons as I feel Lannisters is doubly so. Like like they are four factions back in my experience, shall we say? Like it's been an exceptionally long time since I played Lannisters with any regularity. So it's not to do with it's not to do with power level. Although you could say that if Greyjoys were more powerful, then I would not be having these problems with them, and I would stick with them. It's just my familiarity with them and how long ago. Also, like basically nobody at our club plays Lannisters, so it's not even like I've been playing against Lannisters regularly. No. I just haven't seen them hit the tabletop a lot outside of watching Wop play. And he, importantly, plays in a very different way to the way I play. So that's not even really like experience of watching somebody similar style to me and think, oh yeah, I could just like re-implement his lists, tune up, practice, see what they're about. That's the Lannister faction as a whole was incredibly different the last time I played it. It was still very poor fellow and red cloak based.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Fair. Very fair. Just a quick stop by then, and looking at unit ELOs. Something I just wanted to point out with these is that the unit ELO spread, as is the nature of the case when the game is more balanced, the unit ELO spread is more balanced, right? House Clegane's mounted men at the lowest still at, call it minus 100, are still lo and behold the worst unit statistically in the game. At 6 in Lannisters, add all those different caveats onto it. And at the top end, we see Baelish are 134, which overall difference between top and bottom, 250. Then that's being generous, 250. And that is okay. How many months has it been? About 4 months, 3-4 months of play now. slightly
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah,
But
if you open a unit, then it'll tell you what month it started getting counted.
So February,
Uh,
February, March, April,
February.
May, 4
Yeah,
months.
February, March.
So overall, it's nowhere near as what's the term I want to use? It's nowhere near as mature as obviously 2021 was when it finally ended, because we haven't had that same time limit. But it is certainly not like, this isn't fledgling data where things are changing around a hell of a lot and things are dropping up and dropping down and what have you. It's the data is something we can trust. Baelish, 134, coming out as effectively the standout best thing in the game, basically.
Yeah, he's a decent step. Interestingly, ahead of Tycho, who used to be absolutely
400, 500
mile
points
above
at one point.
everybody.
Wasn't he more than that? Am I right in thinking he was nearly at one point like pushing for 1,000 ELO and the trajectory he was on? It felt like it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, I always need to say people. It's not straightforward to understand unit ELO, right? So remember, guys, what ELO, particularly for a unit, is trying to measure it's trying to measure what is the impact of picking that on your chance to win. And if it's positive, then it means that it's going to increase your chance of winning. And if it's negative, then it's going to mean it's going to decrease your chance of winning versus something else that you could have picked. Now, neutral NCUs are a very interesting topic inside of that discussion, because I think you need to think, not necessarily, is Peter the best thing in the game?
Yeah.
Right? What this says to me, actually, is it says picking Peter rather than one of your own in-faction 4-point NCUs, probably your third best NCU in a 3 NCU setup, is one of the most influential ways to improve your win rate.
Yeah.
When we really think about the whole holistic way, right? And just to meme and to quote somebody, this is how we separate out the variables, right? It's not saying this one specific thing is the best thing in the game because it wins. What it's saying is when we compare all the various different ways that lists can be put together, the various versions that they exist in, we can separate out that the one defining feature that increases your win rate is having Peter Baelish. And having Peter instead of probably your third own in-faction NCU is almost exclusively one of the best things that you can do. Interestingly, also running Tycho, probably instead of Baelish, is also a relatively strong, solid choice.
Yep.
That is because it's near undeniable that the neutral NCUs are better than your second and third tier options within your own faction. So don't consider just how good is Peter. Oh, Peter's amazing. Think, how much better is Peter than the other choice? Yeah. And that's what it's talking about. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's measuring. Choices. And that's what it's separating out from this huge mass of thousands of games. It's separating out what distinguishes this thing which reliably wins from the thing that doesn't reliably win. And so, yeah, unit ELOs specifically are sort of saying versus what else you could have bought. Everything's like a cost analysis basis.
Yeah.
Versus what you could have had for 4 points, versus what you could have had for 7 points in the Queen's Men category, versus what Flayed Men could be instead for 8 points. How powerful are these things? It's one of the reasons why Flayed Men aren't now this massive standout number one. They're still powerful, but by comparison to Champions of the Stag, by comparison to Knights of Casterly Rock, by comparison to Tully Cavaliers, they're not that much better anymore. So they're not a standout winner and a standout way to massively increase your chance of winning. Because you're not, you're not way, way more likely to win because you picked Flayed Men than if you picked Knights of Casterly Rock.
Yeah.
Should Peter cost an extra point? No, Peter should lose his once per game ability to choose a zone. I think that would be enough to bring him back into line, or at least most of the way. I wouldn't. I still point cost changes are so heavy handed. I never recommend them. Just he has two abilities. One of them is the reason people buy him. And that's his like take a zone but pick a different one. That's a very good ability. It's very useful, very powerful, has actually quite important ramifications on the game. He has this secondary ability to once per game say that you control a zone, and I don't think he needs it.
It's that ability alone which enables certain things. Ironically, ironically of all people.
It's for that reason that I always took him in Greyjoys.
Yeah.
So that I can say, I have swords, so what is dead may never die doesn't come off.
Yeah, exactly. And that, ironically, probably is not the most powerful use of him, and yet it probably is one of the best uses within Greyjoy.
Yeah.
Other factions can do it for horses, for example, in Targ, or swords in Stark, or what we also got, letters or crowns in Baratheons, and crowns obviously in Lannisters. Night's Watch don't give a shit, but they just use a replacement. Freefoot can't take them, and neutrals take them because he's 4 points, and you can't afford anything else.
He also just has really useful effects into the meta. If you consider that Endless Horde is such a scourge of the early game, being able to take that horses but not being defined, not being hamstrung into must use the horses. There are also some factions that are incredibly reliant on other zones, and almost none so much on you must stop that zone as Endless Horde currently is. I would say
the biggest one, definitely.
Yeah, it's the most obvious impactful effect. But Lannisters have ways to build around constantly having crowns, but if they haven't done that, then you might as well block crowns. It can be very, very impactful, especially if they're running red cloaks.
Hey, or for Lannisters, moneybags, actually, surprisingly. I think moneybags is a much underwhelming or underappreciated zone in Lannister.
There are a number of factions who moneybags are very important. Interestingly, it's not always owning moneybags which is so important to them, but actually they are really hard in on the healing and the token removal of the moneybag zone, because they don't have any native healing and token removal, so they become really, really dependent on the zone. And so blocking the moneybags while still being able to force through an attack or take an impactful maneuver or something like that. Even taking moneybags, but using it to take letters right early on in the game, so that you basically say, I'm going to give you a token, and that token can't come off because you don't have moneybags. It can't be taken. Can really, really impact some factions that don't have native token control, don't have native token removal. And so, he has a whole range of effects into the meta, which I think that they further add on to his usefulness beyond his overt power. But like I say, I think that his secondary ability would be where I would go to tone him down to make him more acceptable.
Yeah. Minor tweaks, isn't it? Again, minor tweaks. I'm not gonna massively discuss the rest, or don't intend to massively discuss the rest. With Queensmen, Champions of the Stag, we talk about Baratheon doing very well. It's actually a non-Elden side unit that is clearly an outlier there. They're not too powerful. I don't think R'hllor's Queenmen are too powerful. They have obvious weaknesses that you can work around, but they are, which I think is the most important thing, they are pretty much, outside of Champions of the Stag, the grindiest unit in the game. They will basically win a grind with borderline everything else in the game.
And they have phenomenal synergies going on. Is really what they have now.
Yeah. Card recursion, man. Card recursion. Getting cards back.
Yeah.
Hugely valuable. I've been talking about it recently. I view the game now less of a war game than I used to, and everyone knows it. I didn't really view it as much of a war game anyway when it was objective control. I actually think fighting is more prominent now, but I view the game as a resource management game now more so than a war game. In that, how do your resources align with your opponent's resources, and how can you make sure that you use your resources better than they're using theirs? Because if you use your resources better than them, your chances are you will win. And that's because you're probably playing 6 rounds. So knowing how can I get the most value out of these 6 rounds, or can I not? And do I need to end the game faster than that? And thus, do I need to spend resources heavily to gain advantages and push my opponent away from the game because they don't have the resource income to out tempo me, or do I need to outvalue them across the game? And Queen's Men, the whole point of this discussion, Queen's Men coming into it say, I simply have more resources now.
Yeah.
And that's a really good thing. Champions the Stag, again, they simply say, my base stats, my resources of my base stats are simply so good that it's just hard for you to manage that unless you have the tools.
Yeah.
I think none of this is a surprise, watch Captains, Ranger Hunters, but
Watch Captain Ranger Hunters almost inseparable. Like watch Captain Ranger Hunters. What goes better than peanut butter and jelly? Like although watch captains do find place in other units. I do think that Swarm Brother watch captains still very dangerous unit at 10 points, a bit more viable in terms of its consistency and its anti-armor and its staying power, for the sheer explosiveness, the sheer damage potential out of a 10-point watch captain ranger hunter unit in a John list specifically is that's a lot. That's a lot.
I mean, I've seen it happen, right, where you get for the watch out and you go, right, I'll charge off horses, I'll charge this unit, I'll quick fire off this, like retreat, quick fire off, and actually shoot a different unit entirely, and then they, you can't necessarily swords because you don't have a swords option, and you really need to heal one of your 2 options, or desperately do something. You might weaken them or heal or something, and then they're like, right, and now I'll swords and do this, and they shoot one of your units, and all of a sudden, they haven't even activated yet. They've still got Relentless to go, and they have killed nearly 3 units, and you're like, what the fuck?
I think that the unit is still quite meta-defining in a way, and what I mean by that is I still think that although they're not dominating tournaments in the way that awful crossbows were at all. They weren't just like you could build the best possible counters that you can prepare as much as possible for awful crossbows, but awful crossbows will still win.
Sadness.
Ranger Hunters now, they're a much more technical tool. I'm not necessarily say like high skill or anything, right? Like they just have so many more moving parts. They need to put themselves in danger to actually really do their explosive damage. Mm-hmm. There is a lot more interaction going on. You at least are forced to make a melee attack at times, which can allow some people to like trigger certain effects and abilities, which continuous ranged attacks never allowed, right? Like if you can just blow your opponent up entirely with ranged attacks, never have to trigger a melee attack, then that's whole swathes for some people's decks that just don't work. But the point is that they are still powerful enough that they are defining the way a lot of other people build their lists. I think that they are the reason why traps have become so prevalent. Yes. They and a few other things.
100%.
Why people are leaning into units like Champions of the Stag, because the only thing that they're not good against is really, really good armor saves. And also something like Champions of the Stag are like, well, I don't have amazing charge range. And what the Ranger Hunters need to do is they need to get reasonably up close and personal. They might be able to do really tricky maneuvers and maneuver around you, but that cav move is going to get you out of it with those Champions of the Stag and get you back engaged. But it's not going to catch a long-ranged unit. It's not going to do those kind of things. So I think that they are very still impactful in the meta.
Yes.
And
I
that
can
actually
say
they're not doing as well as they possibly theoretically could be is because so many people are list building against maybe not necessarily exactly them, but lists and units that are playing into a very similar style. You might as well group them with Dothraki veterans, do almost exactly the same thing, have the same weaknesses, they take loads of actions at the same time, still very susceptible to traps, still have to get up ranged, up close and personal, have to make melee attacks to get the most out of them. Are weak to order blocking, are weak to it being very predictable when you're going to do an attack, weak to charge blocking, things like that. And so I think that there are a whole range of things in the game which are being built to counter that style, and that's the only reason why Night's Watch aren't dominant these days. Is because now their current most dominant thing can at least be countered.
And like you said before, and I can tell you very much from my own list building thoughts that when I think about list building, I essentially go, my first question, how does this list pair beat John Hunter's? And if it doesn't have that answer to a question, I don't play that list pair. Simple as that. I don't play it because it's not a correct list pair. Free folk is a different answer, but yeah.
So D1, it was interesting that I built Greyjoys on this concept of whether or not I could build this list which can beat it, and that's how I ended up with that slightly ludicrous triple archer, double trapper, Euron silenced men list, which is extreme. And part of the answer was that I didn't even like what I ended up with, as in I still ended up with a not that favorable matchup into the most extreme Night's Watch equivalent, which is also 9 activations. But what I was looking for was I was looking to trade many archer shots to chip damage into the Ranger Hunters. Thing that's really frustrating about fighting Ranger Hunters, Watch Captain Ranger Hunters specifically, is Watch Captain Ranger Hunters with 5 models have the potential to still one-shot like everything in the game, right? Because they're like, oh, I still have full rank. And I also have Sword in the Darkness, so I'm actually rolling 8 dice, and I actually make 2 actions for every I can like double down on my activation. I can do an 8 dice and then a 7 dice straight afterwards. And it's just like, you can't quite play cheap unit chip into that because they just remove a cheap unit a turn, and you think that you're getting good value by chipping, and you're chipping them down to halfway, and then you're like, I haven't actually done anything. Like, they're still at maximum efficiency. Well, it's... yeah, no, and D1, but yeah, like I was saying, so I actually built. It's like I say, I started Greyjoys at this very high level of can I beat John Hunters and can I beat Mant Free Folk? And I built these very extreme lists, and I had limited but okay success with that. And then I tried to play the same lists into the rest of everybody else and realized I'd gone so extreme, so far to one end of skew, that I just had terrible matchups into normal games.
I have to admit, like when I played against Carlo, when Carlo beat me actually, like I straight up said to him after the game at the time, like I actually didn't think his Euron list was even that good into that matchup, which is one of the ones he specifically designed it for. It wasn't bad, like it's certainly not. It wasn't along the bad lines, but it wasn't the best. I certainly didn't worry when he put it on the table. And that's worrying when you're designing a counter list and it doesn't do that to your opponent. You want to say this is a direct counter to what you're running. You should fear this. And then someone looks at it and goes, I don't really though. But yeah, that's back to Greyjoys there briefly. But yes, let's build with things. And it's actually very interesting when you talk about Night's Watch. The one thing that Night's Watch really sucks to, kind of, John has a little bit of mitigation for it. And Greyjoys again suffer to it. Out of activation damage. leaving units. I mean, out of activation damage is very good. Damaging units on your opponent's turn is incredibly powerful because it leaves them with no ability going into your turn to do anything to stop you from killing them.
Yeah. If you can half kill a unit, half's an extreme situation, but
even like,
if you can half kill a unit during your opponent's turn, then the ability for you to now pounce on that unit before it can get away, before your opponent can heal, before your opponent can take a zone, before your opponent can play any start of friendly turn triggers, are all very, very powerful.
Yeah.
And that comes back to why Tycho is still a pretty good choice.
Yeah. Exactly where I was going with that. And it's also, by the way, where all the defensive tech, which people think is like, the defensive tech in the game is good. But the problem with the defensive tech in the game is that if you can avoid it, a good player will do everything that they possibly can to avoid it, because that is their downfall. If you run into a unit with Counter Strike and you're hitting on 5s and you're running over a bog and you half kill your own unit with your own attack, yeah, you're fucking lost. Like, so you don't do that. That's a bad decision. Whereas, Overgrowth, very good example. Something that was carrying Loras, for example. Just here's some damage for doing what you want to do at ranged or in melee, and it's like, that's really annoying, because that's how Baratheons can then make a hole to take advantage of. What does Night's Watch play into traps? That's a good question. I haven't thought about it massively on the other side of it. I haven't tried to think about how I would beat my list as much, because I actually still think, here's the funny thing, I think a very trap-heavy list.
Crossbowmen?
Crossbowmen is a potential issue, although I don't think they're good enough. I actually think a very trap-heavy list, ironically, you still run the John. Like, that's how good the John matchup is into so many things, that I think even into dedicated counters, I still think the John list is good enough that it can beat it.
I agree.
Personally.
I agree. I don't think that's a bad matchup for John.
No. I think it brings it more in line with a 50-50. And
I think John's only bad matchup is a Wall of Armor. John Ranger Hunters.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And that's where you can tech in the Swarm Brothers in your second list and go lol. Because they will rinse through anything with armor at a rapid pace. So, there we go. Anyway, bottom end, we still see, we talked briefly about, I'm not going to spend more time talking about Mountain's Men, but it is actually very interesting that whole discussion we just had, and you look at some of the worst units in the game, Veterans of the Watch, Bloody Mama Skirmishers, Houseboltman Blackguards, defensive units with technology that you can work around. Just don't attack them in melee. You don't give a shit about Bloody Mamas then, because they don't do fuck all.
And I agree with Paul, actually. The out of activation damage, particularly on a card like Lash Out, the sheer fear that it could have and it could happen can be incredibly impactful. It can really paralyze people from making like almost any powerful attack if they think that you're going to go end up on one rank. If 4 damage back, 4 auto wounds back could be like a death knell to the unit for doing it. It can be a really, really impactful card. Yeah, I would put Lash Out as like absolute top tier. Like if I can find a commander with Lash Out, then I'm already thinking this is one of the best choices this faction can make.
And on the same topic, Final Strike. Yeah. Very, enough to Final Strike's enough to bait out a Barry block in the potential hope that it doesn't come out or that it can get cancelled. Okay. Yeah. So, that is kind of where we're sat there. It is actually interesting to see, and counter to what I thought potentially initially. Then it kind of came fruition. The Baratheon Highgarden units, the Riders and the Pikemen, are kind of in freefall. They are not doing well. I do actually think the Pikemen are better than this. The riders, I can see the problem being that they're not activation heavy enough. Therefore, the riders never get to do what they want to do, and then they get themselves in a position where they haven't charged. They get countercharged, and then they get fucking blown up. um, and that's a list building issue that Brathians have, where going shorter is generally better in Brathian rather than longer. The pikeman probably suffering the same thing, but I personally do think that the pikeman is all right. What's actually super interesting is the Master Warden, with his very strong start to the season, has now dropped down. As a 1-point attachment, he's just not actually that good, which is really odd because he initially started the season as one of the best components in terms of 1-point attachments.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't really been looking into the barrows. I wonder whether or not there has been a strong shift in list building mentality to that like people are playing much less engage based, be it for various different reasons.
Well, for example, yeah. Same. It's almost like these good things. It's actually the funny thing. If something's good and it's avoidable, and it becomes too good, it nerfs itself. People adapt, as one said. Yeah, it ceases to become relevant.
Or at least, the meta adapts, but it doesn't stop that ability from being incredibly powerful. Particularly for against anybody who hasn't adapted, or against anybody who hasn't seen it for ages. Like, it's very easy to get caught out by those abilities if you discount them because you forget that that the reason why the meta's in the place that it's in is because those abilities were so powerful that you had to build lists that would avoid them entirely, and then your opponent has one of them, and you just forget that it's like such an influential ability because it's been a long time since you got absolutely slapped around by it. I find that can be quite telling, at least in my own games. Sometimes I'm like, God, I forgot that like this unit is totally avoidable, and the reason why I normally avoid it is because its strengths are strong.
Yeah.
But the thing is I can avoid all those strengths if I remember just how strong that unit is.
When you make a series of early decisions and don't register those impacts of those decisions, and then you end up that you're like, oh shit, I'm now doing the thing that I didn't want to do.
It can be as my only route to victory. As early and as simple as your deployment. Like it can be right, if you just haven't recognized in deployment, like that unit cannot go against that unit because I just like that one ability, that disrupt or that counter strike or that hold the line or whatever, will just completely ruin me if these two units get engaged. And it's until you get quite close and then you're like, oh, what does that unit do again? And they like show you the card and you're like, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. Like I can't charge you. Like I will lose. But like when I put the unit down, my full intention was like I'm a better unit than you. Like yours is kind of crap. Nobody feels it. I don't remember why people don't feel it, but like it's not very good. People don't use it. Mine's a good unit. I'll win this fight. And then you get close to actually engaging, and you're like, I remember why people don't like this matchup.
I love how that really was at the moment where we should have had the meme. It was at this moment he knew he fucked up.
I made a terrible mistake.
It is a big thing. Actually, it goes back to a fundamental thing, which I do believe is still the best advice to anybody if they're looking to get better, right? Certainly for tournament play, go away and learn. If you have the capability to learn everything in the game, learn everything in the game. Because then you don't get these surprises where you're like, oh, that unit has disrupt? Fuck. You can get by with learning what you think you're going to encounter, and then that random list skew might come along, and you have this moment that Carlo sometimes has before he goes into a game, and he's like, what the fuck do any of these units do? So he spends 5 minutes reading through the opponent's list to remind himself, and then he comes away and goes, all right, I know how to beat that now. Because he's identified those things.
Normally they're trash. If I've never seen them before, it's normally trash. You just have to remind yourself why it's trash.
And you're just like, as Carlo would sometimes put it, and myself, I just don't do this. As long as I just don't do this, I'll win. And you have to remind yourself what that don't do is sometimes. But yeah, knowledge is power. Use it well. Yeah. Anyway, should we go into some events and look at what's running?
Yeah.
Hey, look, Australia have got an event.
Oh, nice.
That's been there for a while.
And Sydney again, as per usual.
And randomly, Thailand had a load of events this weekend.
They did.
Yeah.
They had those 4 groups, right? That 4. They had those 4 Swiss draw. I don't know if they're now going to go into the finals.
I believe so.
Another day, or...
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh wow,
that's a great image. That's massive. Jesus. It's a massive picture of regret. Cool. I mean, these haven't been locked yet, so they haven't actually been finished up yet, and they're all playing into the next one. But just thought I'd check in on one of them. Yeah, I really hope those go well. Once we see the finals of that, we might have to do a bit of a deeper dive into that one. But yes, we'd have a look at it. Lockerbie's clock event. Let's have a little look at what the stats in terms of faction breakdowns were, and look at that pretty little circle there. That is a fairly good spread of faction. Rip neutral. They're not a faction.
Yeah,
who cares?
I was going to say no neutral, unfortunately, but yeah, I think that's healthy. That's healthy spread. Not got a healthy spread of results just yet. Just the 100% win rate for Targs.
Who's played the game?
That's NSB. That's NSB beating Ariakas, which is a big play. What did Ariakas use? Did he use his Eddard or did he use his Howland?
He used his Eddard.
Okay, yeah, I really do rate Eddard at the moment. He was one of those. He was one of those commanders who's not dominating the game, but was just another thing where I was like, Greyjoys don't like this matchup. I don't like this matchup with these lists.
He's another trap commander, right? In that if you forget what he does, forget how he does it, and you don't have the solution, Eddard comes in like a fucking furious fist and just fucks you in the ass, and you go, oh well, Eddard's honor guard just killed my entire army. That was fun, because he does do that. Eddard does kill a lot of things.
I think this event will be interesting. It's being run with clocks. After all that discussion about clocks, it was thrown together relatively quickly, but a good 18-player entry. I think that it's. I hope that clocks effectively become the norm for TTS myself, not because clock play, therefore tournaments are higher level, higher whatever. I think that, interestingly, if we can normalize clocks, then we can make TTS tournaments more accessible time-wise for people. And scheduling a 2-hour game when you know it's only going to be 2 hours is way, way easier than if you think, well, I'm going to have to book out a 4-hour slot in my life because the game could last that long.
I also, for what it's worth, I also believe that if clocked events are going to come back, then I would have more inclination to put 2 hours aside to do streaming of them.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it can really help the regrowth of the TTS streaming community, regrowth of interest in the competitive side of the game. Just because of the speed at which people play makes it way, way easier for people to watch on a casual level. Obviously, I think that there is some trepidation around clocks for some people, and so I think that is not wildly different to the trepidation that some people have around the whole idea of even using stats, for example, right?
Yeah.
But I think that once you can normalize it, once you can remove people's fears that it's some intense thing and it has to be some super high level play before you ever introduce it. And if you can introduce it at the earliest possible reasonable time, I'm not saying beginners have to begin playing under a clock, but as soon as a person can make choices, you just put them under some pressure to just make the first choice that comes to their mind and then think about later whether or not it was right rather than trying to think through every choice. Then I think that the game can progress and move forward in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. All right then. Let's actually dive into the events after we got madly deeply distracted. So, where are we? We are on this weekend. An event in Poland. Oh, I didn't ask you. That's happening tomorrow. Do you remember that one that's happening tomorrow? We said we'd mention it. It's an event in Poland. It's happening tomorrow. Polish have been weak. They've only been doing like one event a week recently, not like 17. So
letting us down.
yeah. So we've got that one happening in Wrocław, Poland. We've got an event happening, a local league happening in Granville in France.
Awesome.
Another event on Wednesday, an evening tournament in Warsaw, Poland. Good man. What looks like to be the second Torneo Gras del Puente in Barcelona, at Goblin Trader in Barcelona, Spain. An event happening in Namur, Belgium. That's great. I know the Belgian players have been using the site. We have Belgian users, but we don't see Belgian events very often, so that's really good to see. That's a positive thing happening on Saturday. Another event in Poland. God, they really have pulled the stops out this week.
Yeah.
A small event happening in Pontypool at Duke's Gaming this weekend in the UK. We've got another qualifier happening on Saturday in Rochester, New York. So that's another one there. We have another event in France in Montbrison. Small event there. House of Orcs Volume 5. The Italian players are back from the House of Orcs. Jasper and the crew on Sunday this week in Italy. An event happening in Spain, Santander. A local event testing session. I have no
event with no location.
Yeah, no location.
Sus.
Sus. But it might just be a local event where they're just not for international signups or anything like that. They're just doing to see how it works. An event happening in
about whether or not Mickey's ever going to do a video on how to use the site.
That's one of those pending videos. Pending my
pending you getting off your ass. Ooh.
Orcs. We've got Summer is Coming also this weekend. That's Gamers Castle in Greece, which I'm guessing it's in Cyrillic, Greek Cyrillic, however we call it. But yeah, and then there's also Gdansk, Poland. Maybe I wasn't joking. 4 or 5 events making up for the mad number that they haven't got. And we've also got the TTS Championship thing that they're running for a month. This is a small round robin event, if I remember rightly, in France. And that's starting up this weekend. And that's it. So, Jesus Christ. Let's disclude that last one, a TTS event. But physical events, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 events happening between now and next Monday. 13 events! And like half of them are Polish.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome for the site and also awesome for the community in general. It's to the point where it's like hard for us to even talk about the results anymore. There's so many of them. You know, we're here back at a classic 3 hours. 3-hour video, and all we managed to do was touch on like kind of like general trends of like 3 Baratheon winners. Good to see that there's another regionals. I mean, we must be down to I believe we're 5 weeks away from Gen Con, maybe 6 or 7. I forget. Like it's about 4 or 5 weeks till I go to the US, but that'll be a while. I'm not sure how many more regionals there will be. I don't know.
I think there's still a couple.
I can't really think that there are many people who are still organizing them at this point, right? Like, presumably they've all been announced somewhat. I think that that post that we talked about earlier, where they basically said you can still get a regional, is coming a little bit late. But tell you what's crazy. I mean, at this point last year, US nationals hadn't even been announced. So like them still having the capacity to run a regionals at this point is a major step forward. So yeah,
it's a positive thing, right? Yeah, it's certainly moving in the right direction. I've just had a message as well. We didn't mention it, but the American Invitational TTS event did actually finish up over the
Oh
week.
yeah.
Break the Meta's due to finish, I believe, this week. But Stovetop, Stephen, and Richard Line both do very well. And Lucas Aurelius, there you go, coming in third with the Starks. Another consistent, decent performance.
Online TT's event. Why did they not at least run a fifth? Oh, come on, Stephen, you need to play N-Line. N-Line, you need to play Stovetop.
Yeah.
Come on. There can only be one.
There can only be one. Just do it, yeah. One round only event. Someone talk to whoever the boss man is. Cyrus, I think, ran that event. Yeah, so definitely do that. If you can. If not, play it friendly and tell us the winner, and then Carlo will manually take the cup off Stovetop if N-Line wins. Can you do that, Carlo? Is that a thing as an admin?
I mean, I can. I do sometimes do it when.
Hang on. Am I still there? Am I still there? Hang on.
Sometimes people submit tournaments wrong, and the wrong person gets given the cup, and then the only way to undo that is manually. So I do sometimes manually undo somebody's cup, which they shouldn't have been given, just so that I can make sure that it's given to the right person.
Sure. All hail Carlo, the dictator of cups.
Yeah. You pray hard enough, then you can keep your cups.
Cool, fantastic. Anyway, thank you very much for everyone tuning in this week, guys. Golden Company suck, but maybe Swordsmen are okay. Don't run off as a spam unless you want a meme, and enjoy events that you may or may not be attending this week. Any last comments from yourself, Carlo?
No, just Paul. No, Mickey hasn't finished the intro yet. Keep bringing those subs in. He's definitely going to do it by the time we get to 1,000. We got about a third of the way between the 950 and the 1,000 in the last week. So he's got about 2 more weeks at the current rate. But if you suddenly flood it, then he'll have to make it.
Yeah. So subscribe to Some Ice and Fire Stats Online here on YouTube, or on YouTube if you're listening to the podcast, and you'll force me to make a new video intro. I say make, it's actually kind of made, it just isn't finished. So that'll be a thing. Try not to do it this week because I've got a load of shit at work I need to do this week. Please. Next week's fine. We've got a couple more weeks left of Carlo. We are gearing up for all of that, and other things that will be coming soon. If you are interested, sign up for Patreon. That's on the site, obviously, and get all the kind of awesome goodies, which is mainly just talking to Carlo and taking the piss out of him on a 24/7 basis in public areas, rather than in a private message where you just send him a message and say, by the way.
I have to say, the Patreon chat recently has gotten a lot more people asking me to fix the site. It used to be a lot more just trolling me, and these days people want real things like better UX, buttons to be in different places. They want me to change the wording of different things, which is honestly, which is great. I actually really am glad when people want to interact with the site and want to help give ideas about what to improve it for the users. But the memeing needs to come back. The meme lord himself, Weasel Kingdom, still on a bit of a hiatus, still a bit away from the game. So hopefully he'll lead the charge back into Memesville to any Discord near you sometime soon.
Definitely. All right then, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us this week. We will catch you again next week, where we'll probably have some news to talk about that will probably come out just after this video ends, or tomorrow morning. Classic. And between now and then, guys, have a great week. Enjoy any events you're at. See you later.
Ready?